Imagine a civilization that spanned over 1,000 years, holding the secrets of an empire at its height, only to collapse in a single fateful day. What did the Byzantine Empire leave behind, and how does its rise and fall continue to shape our world today? The rise of the Byzantine Empire is inextricably linked to the slow and steady decline of the Roman Empire. By the 3rd century AD, the Roman Empire was facing an array of insurmountable challenges. The vast empire, which stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia, was becoming too large to govern effectively, and the once formidable Roman legions were struggling to deal with constant threats from barbarian tribes on the frontiers. The empire was divided into numerous factions, each with its own political and military concerns. There was no longer a single emperor, and the central authority that had once unified Rome was fracturing under the weight of its own size. The crisis was compounded by economic instability. Rampant inflation and the devaluation of Roman currency undermined trade and industry. Rome's infrastructure, once the pinnacle of engineering, began to crumble due to lack of funds and administrative inefficiency. This economic decline made it harder for the empire to maintain its vast military apparatus and defend its borders. As the Western Roman Empire weakened, the eastern provinces began to develop their own sense of identity and autonomy, setting the stage for the eventual division of the empire. The decisive moment in this division came in 395 AD, after the death of Emperor Theodosius I. The empire, already divided into two halves, was formally split between his two sons. The western half, with its capital in Rome, was weakened by invasions from the Visigoths, Vandals, and other barbarian groups, while the eastern half, with its capital in Constantinople, enjoyed a relatively stable period of economic and military strength. While Rome struggled to fend off invaders, Constantinople flourished, benefiting from its strategic location between Europe and Asia, and its proximity to trade routes that allowed for wealth to flow into the empire. Constantinople's status as the new heart of the Roman Empire marked a significant shift. The city's location allowed the Eastern Empire to defend itself more effectively against external threats, while its economic and military strength grew. Its emperor, often referred to as the Byzantine Emperor, was able to maintain control over the eastern provinces, which were more developed and wealthier than their western counterparts. The Eastern Empire adopted a more centralized administrative structure, and it was here that the enduring traditions of Roman law, governance, and culture were preserved, while the West slowly crumbled under the weight of invasions and internal decay. The fall of Rome in 476 AD, when the last Roman emperor in the West was deposed by the Germanic chieftain Odoacer, marked the end of the Western Roman Empire. But the Eastern Roman Empire, which would come to be known as the Byzantine Empire, continued to thrive. As the West fell into the so-called Dark Ages, the Eastern Empire would preserve and adapt the traditions of Rome for nearly another 1,000 years, shaping the course of medieval history. The Byzantine Empire became the last remnant of the once mighty Roman civilization, and its legacy would influence the future of both Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean for centuries to come. In the early 4th century AD, the Roman Empire was deeply divided, both politically and territorially. The Emperor Constantine, facing the empire's growing challenges and threats from all sides, realized the need for a more secure and centralized capital to ensure the survival of the empire. In 330 AD, he founded a new city on the site of Byzantium, an ancient Greek colony located on the Bosporus Strait, strategically positioned between Europe and Asia. This city would become the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire and would eventually be known as Constantinople. Constantine's decision to build a new capital was a reflection of both strategic necessity and visionary leadership. Byzantium's location was unrivaled. It sat at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, controlling the vital land and sea trade routes that connected the Mediterranean with the Black Sea. Its position made it an ideal hub for commerce, military defense, and diplomacy. offering a unique vantage point for controlling the empire's vast territories. The Bosporus Strait itself formed a natural barrier, providing protection against naval attacks from both east and west. Constantine's new city was more than just a military stronghold. It was a symbol of Roman renewal and a beacon of imperial power. The city was meticulously planned with grand avenues, monumental structures, and impressive walls. The Hippodrome, a massive arena for chariot races and public events, became a symbol of Constantinople's importance in Roman culture and entertainment. The city's infrastructure was designed to rival Rome itself, with the addition of majestic buildings, churches, and forums that showcased the glory of the Roman Empire. The founding of Constantinople also marked the beginning of a new era for Christianity. Constantine, who had embraced Christianity and become its patron, saw the city as a place where the Christian faith could flourish alongside Roman traditions. He ordered the construction of the Hagia Sophia, a magnificent church that would become one of the most important religious and architectural landmarks in the empire. The city's significance as both a political and religious center would grow throughout the centuries. The strategic significance of Constantinople could not be overstated. As the Western Roman Empire continued to face decline, the Eastern Empire began to center its power in this new capital. Over time, Constantinople became not only the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, but also the heart of Byzantine culture, politics, and religion. The city's walls, designed to withstand sieges, protected it from numerous attacks over the centuries, including the devastating invasions that would eventually bring down Rome and much of the West. Constantinople was destined to become the center of the Byzantine Empire for over 1,000 years, witnessing the rise and fall of empires, the flourishing of art and learning, and the ongoing struggle to preserve the Roman legacy in an increasingly complex world. It stood as a testament to Constantine's foresight and the empire's enduring strength. Constantine's conversion to Christianity was a turning point not only in his own life, but also in the history of the Roman Empire. Before his reign, Christianity had been a marginalized and persecuted faith, its followers often suffering under imperial edicts. Yet, in a remarkable turn of events, Constantine's personal journey from a pagan ruler to a devout Christian would reshape the empire's religious landscape forever. In 312 AD, Constantine faced a pivotal moment at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, where he saw a vision in the sky of a cross accompanied by the words, "In this sign, conquer," interpreting this as a divine omen. He adopted the Christian faith and had his soldiers emblazon their shields with the Christian symbol. The victory that followed cemented his belief in the power of the Christian God and marked the beginning of his commitment to the faith. Constantine's conversion was not just a personal shift, it was a strategic decision that would forever change the trajectory of the empire. Upon becoming emperor, Constantine sought to end the persecution of Christians, which had plagued the empire for centuries. In 313 AD, he issued the Edict of Milan, granting religious tolerance to all religions within the empire, effectively legalizing Christianity. This was a monumental shift in policy that allowed Christians to worship freely without fear of reprisal. Constantine's support for Christianity went beyond mere tolerance. He actively promoted it, using his imperial power to aid in the construction of Christian churches, including the Grand Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, marking the spot where Christians believed Jesus was buried. The transformation of the Roman Empire under Constantine's rule extended to the very foundations of the state itself. By the time of his death, in 337 AD, Christianity had become not only a legally recognized religion, but also the dominant faith in the empire. Constantine convened the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, where Christian leaders gathered to resolve doctrinal disputes and establish a unified belief system. This council resulted in the Nicene Creed, which outlined the core tenets of Christian belief and helped to define orthodoxy for centuries to come. Constantine's Christianization of the empire was not without its challenges. While many embraced the new faith, there were still pockets of resistance, particularly among traditional Roman elites and pagans who viewed the rise of Christianity as a threat to the empire's ancient cultural and religious identity. Constantine, however, was unwavering in his belief that Christianity would be the foundation of a new, unified Roman Empire. He saw the Christian faith as a unifying force that could bring stability and order to an empire struggling with internal divisions and external threats. As the first emperor to fully embrace Christianity, Constantine laid the groundwork for what would become the Christian Byzantine Empire. His conversion not only changed the religious landscape, but also ensured that Christianity would become integral to the empire's identity, shaping its political, cultural, and social institutions for centuries to come. The Christianization of the Roman Empire under Constantine marked the beginning of a new era, one in which the Christian faith would not only survive, but flourish in the heart of the ancient world. The Council of Nicaea, convened in 325 AD by Emperor Constantine, stands as one of the most significant events in early Christian history. As the Roman Empire embraced Christianity, internal theological disputes threatened the unity of the Christian faith. The council was called to address these divisions, particularly the controversy surrounding the nature of Christ and his relationship to God the Father. Constantine, eager to establish a unified and stable Christian empire, saw the resolution of these theological disputes as crucial for the empire's future. At the heart of the controversy was Arianism, a belief introduced by the priest Arius of Alexandria, which argued that Christ, though divine, was not co-eternal with God the Father. Arius and his followers believed that Jesus, as the Son of God, was created by the Father and therefore, in their view, was subordinate to him. This belief sharply contrasted with the position held by many church leaders who believed in the full divinity of Christ, asserting that Jesus was of the same substance as the Father. Constantine, initially unversed in theological debates, but determined to maintain peace and unity, sought to resolve the matter once and for all. He invited bishops from all corners of the empire to meet in Nicaea, a city in present-day Turkey. Over 300 bishops attended, including key figures such as Athanasius of Alexandria, who staunchly opposed Arius. As the bishops gathered, tensions ran high, as the theological implications of the debate carried enormous weight not just for the church but for the entire empire. The discussions at the council were intense, but after several weeks of debate, a consensus began to form around the belief in the full divinity of Christ. The result was the Nicene Creed, a statement of faith that declared Jesus Christ as begotten, not made, consubstantial with the Father. The Nicene Creed became the cornerstone of Christian orthodoxy, affirming that Christ was fully divine, co-eternal with the Father, and of the same essence or substance as God. This declaration sought to end the division between Arius's followers and those who supported the orthodox view of Christ's nature. Although the Nicene Creed was adopted, the Arian controversy did not end with the council. For years, Arianism continued to influence the empire, especially among the Germanic tribes and even within some segments of the Roman aristocracy. Constantine's efforts to enforce the Nicene Creed were met with resistance, and it was not until later emperors, particularly Theodosius I, that Arianism was officially suppressed. The Council of Nicaea marked a turning point for Christianity, solidifying the theological foundation for what would become the Christian Byzantine Empire. By establishing the Nicene Creed as the standard of Christian belief, the Council sought to unite a diverse and growing Christian community under a single, orthodox doctrine. The theological decisions made at Nicaea reverberated throughout the centuries, shaping the course of Christian doctrine and defining the relationship between the divine and human in the person of Jesus Christ. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD marks one of the most defining moments in history, a process that unfolded over several centuries. As the empire grew increasingly unstable, Internal weaknesses and external pressures combined to create an environment in which its eventual collapse seemed inevitable. The Western Roman Empire, once a towering symbol of power and civilization, had suffered from political instability, economic decline, and invasions from barbarian tribes. These factors, compounded by corrupt leadership and military overreach, left the empire vulnerable to the pressures that would ultimately bring it to its knees. By the mid-5th century, the empire was divided between its eastern and western halves, with the Eastern Roman Empire, or Byzantine Empire, remaining more prosperous and resilient, while the Western Roman Empire struggled with civil war, poverty, and a weakening military. The Eastern Roman Empire, with its capital at Constantinople, remained strong under the rule of capable emperors like Theodosius I and his successors. The Byzantine Empire, as it came to be known, was able to maintain its dominance in the Eastern Mediterranean, using its strategic position, wealth, and formidable defences to stave off threats. The Western Empire, however, could not weather the storm. The Germanic tribes, including the Visigoths, Vandals, and Ostrogoths, began to press against the empire's borders. In 410 AD, the Visigoths under King Alaric sacked Rome, a shock that demonstrated the empire's inability to defend itself. Though Rome would continue to exist for several more decades, the events of 410 marked the beginning of the end. By the time the last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by the barbarian chieftain Odoacer in 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire had essentially ceased to exist. The Eastern Roman Empire, which would be known as the Byzantine Empire, found itself standing alone as the successor to the Roman world. Emperor Zeno, ruling from Constantinople, recognized the need to secure his empire's future in the wake of the Western Empire's demise. The Byzantine Empire continued to thrive, largely due to its strong military, strategic location, and rich cultural heritage. It would survive for nearly 1,000 more years, preserving Roman law, traditions, and Christianity, while the Western world entered the so-called Dark Ages. In the centuries that followed, the Byzantine Empire would endure numerous challenges, but it would also play a pivotal role in preserving the knowledge and culture of the ancient world. The fall of the Western Roman Empire marked the end of an era, but the Eastern Roman Empire carried the torch forward, keeping the Roman legacy alive in the face of a changing world. The transition from Roman rule in the West to Byzantine dominance in the East reshaped the political and cultural landscape of Europe and the Mediterranean for generations to come. The age of Justinian stands as one of the most influential periods in the history of the Byzantine Empire. Emperor Justinian I, who ruled from 527 to 565 AD, sought to restore the grandeur of the Roman Empire and secure its legacy for future generations. His reign, marked by both military conquests and significant cultural achievements, transformed the Byzantine Empire and left an enduring mark on legal and architectural history. One of Justinian's most lasting contributions was his codification of Roman law, known as the Corpus Juris Civilis, or the body of civil law. In an effort to streamline and consolidate centuries of Roman legal principles, Justinian ordered a comprehensive compilation of laws, legal opinions, and decrees. This monumental work, spearheaded by the jurist Tribonian, laid the foundation for much of modern European legal systems. It preserved the essence of Roman law while adapting it to the needs of the Byzantine state, ensuring that Justinian's vision of a strong, unified legal framework would endure long after his reign. The Corpus Juris Civilis became the backbone of Byzantine law, influencing legal systems in Europe, particularly through the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, and is still referenced in modern legal theory today. However, Justinian's ambitions were not confined to legal matters. His reign also saw the construction of one of the most iconic and enduring symbols of Byzantine culture, the Hagia Sophia. The church, completed in 537 AD, stands as a testament to Justinian's desire to leave a monumental legacy. Commissioned as a cathedral for Constantinople, the Hagia Sophia was designed to surpass all other churches in grandeur and beauty. Its innovative architectural design, particularly its massive dome, which appeared to float miraculously above the central nave, became a symbol of Byzantine architectural brilliance. The Hagia Sophia's stunning mosaics, intricate marble work, and grand scale reflected the empire's wealth, power, and devotion to Christianity, while also signaling the spiritual and political authority of the emperor. Justinian's military campaigns were equally ambitious. Determined to reclaim the lost territories of the Western Roman Empire, he waged several successful campaigns in North Africa, Italy, and Spain. Under the command of his general, Belisarius, the Byzantine army recaptured North Africa from the Vandals and Italy from the Ostrogoths. While these conquests temporarily restored Roman control over parts of the Western Mediterranean, the costs of these campaigns drained the empire's resources and strained its military capacity. The territories were difficult to maintain, and over time, the gains made during Justinian's rule would be lost to invading forces and internal strife. Despite the challenges of warfare and political upheaval, Justinian's reign is remembered as a period of immense transformation for the Byzantine Empire. His reforms, military conquests, and monumental projects helped solidify the empire's status as the heir to the Roman world. Although Justinian's empire would eventually face decline after his death, his reign marked a golden age for Byzantium, one in which legal, architectural, and cultural advancements laid the groundwork for future generations. His legacy endures in the Corpus Juris Civilis and the Hagia Sophia, both enduring symbols of the enduring strength of the Byzantine Empire. The Plague of Justinian, which struck in 541 AD, stands as one of the most catastrophic events in the history of the Byzantine Empire. A virulent and deadly pandemic, it decimated the empire's population, weakened its economy, and left a lasting impact on the political stability of the region. The disease, believed to be caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, was the first recorded outbreak of the bubonic plague and spread rapidly across Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire, before sweeping throughout the Mediterranean world. The plague's arrival coincided with a period of imperial ambition under Emperor Justinian I. The emperor had been engaged in a series of military campaigns aimed at restoring the Western Roman Empire, recapturing territories in North Africa, Italy, and Spain. However, the devastating plague severely undermined these efforts. The death toll in Constantinople alone was staggering, with estimates suggesting that as much as half of the city's population perished in the initial waves of the outbreak. The disease spread quickly through the dense population, exploiting the poor sanitation and crowded living conditions of the time. The plague's economic impact was equally severe. With a large portion of the population dying, labor shortages became rampant, affecting agriculture, manufacturing, and trade. Fields went untended, markets faltered, and industries reliant on a steady workforce ground to a halt. Revenue from taxes, a crucial source of income for the state, plummeted as whole regions of the empire were left underpopulated or abandoned. The disruption in the workforce also led to a decline in the production of military supplies, further weakening the empire's ability to defend its borders or continue its military campaigns in the West. In addition to the immediate economic consequences, the plague of Justinian also had profound social and political effects. The high mortality rate, coupled with the long-term disruptions to daily life, strained the social fabric of the empire. The loss of experienced soldiers and administrators hindered Justinian's ability to govern effectively, while widespread fear and uncertainty eroded public morale. Religious and philosophical reflections on the plague portrayed it as divine punishment, further intensifying the societal upheaval. In the face of such devastating loss, Justinian's reforms and monumental projects, like the construction of the Hagia Sophia, seemed distant and inadequate to many who were simply trying to survive. Despite these enormous challenges, the Byzantine Empire did not collapse under the weight of the plague. Justinian, ever determined, continued to push forward with his ambitions, but the empire's recovery from the devastation would take years. The plague recurred in multiple waves, each time cutting down more of the population and delaying any hopes of a full recovery. While the plague of Justinian did not mark the end of the Byzantine Empire, it certainly weakened its foundations, and its legacy reverberated through the empire's subsequent decline. The disaster left a permanent scar on the empire's demography, economy, and psyche, shaping the course of Byzantine history for centuries to come. The Byzantine military was one of the most formidable and sophisticated military systems of the ancient world, designed to protect the empire from external threats and maintain its vast territories. Building upon the foundations laid by the Roman legions, the Byzantine army evolved over centuries, adapting to the changing dynamics of warfare, technology, and geopolitics. Its organization, structure, and strategies became key elements in the empire's survival for over 1,000 years. At the core of the Byzantine military was the concept of the tagmata, elite standing units that were stationed in and around Constantinople. These units were highly trained, well-equipped, and directly under imperial control, serving as the emperor's personal guard and the first line of defense against any immediate threats to the capital. The tagmata were supplemented by themes, regional military districts that provided additional forces when needed. These themes were responsible for raising and training soldiers from their local populations, ensuring a ready supply of troops to defend against both external invasions and internal uprisings. The Byzantine army's composition was a blend of professional soldiers, mercenaries, and levied troops. The use of mercenaries was common throughout the empire's history, as the Byzantine emperors often employed foreign soldiers, such as the Varangians, to supplement their ranks. The Varangian Guard, made up largely of Norsemen, became one of the most famous military units in Byzantine service, renowned for their loyalty and ferocity in battle. These mercenaries, however, often posed a double-edged sword, as their presence sometimes led to internal power struggles and a lack of cohesion within the ranks. The Byzantine military's success lay not just in the quantity of its troops, but in its ability to innovate and adapt. The Byzantine emperors understood the importance of intelligence and strategy in warfare. The Strategikon, a military manual written by Emperor Maurice in the 6th century, outlined the tactics and strategies that became the backbone of Byzantine warfare. It emphasized flexibility in combat, the use of terrain to gain advantages, and the importance of psychological warfare to undermine the enemy's morale. The Byzantine navy also played a crucial role in defending the empire, especially in securing the eastern Mediterranean from pirate raids and naval invasions. The navy was a vital component of the Byzantine military, especially during times of siege or territorial defense. The use of Greek fire, a secret incendiary weapon that could burn even on water, gave the Byzantine fleet a significant advantage over its rivals. This weapon, alongside the fleet's organization and mobility, helped secure Byzantine control over key maritime trade routes. Despite its strengths, the Byzantine military faced many challenges. The empire's vast borders, ranging from the eastern frontier with the Sassanids to the western Mediterranean, required a constant state of readiness. Over time, the military's power became more decentralized, with local commanders sometimes gaining significant influence, which could lead to power struggles and even civil wars. Additionally, the changing nature of warfare, including the rise of new military technologies and strategies, posed a continuous challenge for the Byzantine forces. In the end, the Byzantine military was more than just an instrument of war. It was a symbol of the empire's resilience and adaptability. It allowed the Byzantine Empire to defend itself against waves of invaders, from the Arabs in the 7th century to the Crusaders in the 12th. While the military's power ultimately waned in the face of overwhelming external forces, its legacy in the history of military strategy remains profound. Justinian II's reign was marked by ambitious military campaigns aimed at reconquering the lost territories of the Western Roman Empire. His vision was to restore the empire to its former glory, pushing the boundaries of the Byzantine realm and reasserting its dominance across the Mediterranean. The military campaigns that defined his reign were aggressive, costly, and fraught with challenges, yet they reflected Justinian's determination to secure the Byzantine legacy. One of the most significant military undertakings was the reconquest of North Africa, which had fallen to the Vandals in the 5th century. In 533, Justinian entrusted his general Belisarius with the task of reclaiming the region. The campaign was swift and successful, with Belisarius decisively defeating the Vandal king Gelimer at the Battle of Tricamarum. The victory restored North Africa to the Byzantine Empire and solidified Belisarius's reputation as one of history's great military commanders. The reconquest also brought immense wealth to the empire, as the fertile lands of North Africa were vital for food production and trade. Following the success in Africa, Justinian turned his attention to Italy, which had been under the control of the Ostrogoths since the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Italy presented a much more formidable challenge, as the Ostrogoths had entrenched themselves in the peninsula. In 535, Justinian sent Belisarius again to lead the campaign to reclaim Italy. The Byzantine forces initially made impressive progress, capturing Sicily and advancing to the mainland. However, the Ostrogoths, under their king, Totila, mounted a fierce resistance. The war dragged on for nearly 2 decades, with both sides suffering significant losses. Eventually, the Byzantine forces were able to reclaim most of Italy, but at great cost. The prolonged conflict left the region devastated, and the reconquered territories were weakened, making it difficult for the Byzantines to maintain full control. Simultaneously, Justinian sought to expand his influence in Spain. The Visigoths, who had controlled most of the Iberian Peninsula, were a growing threat to Byzantine interests. However, the campaign in Spain was less successful than those in North Africa and Italy. The military efforts in Spain faced internal divisions and external resistance, which hindered the expansionist agenda. The Visigoths, despite being militarily inferior, successfully defended their territory, and the Byzantine Empire was unable to make significant inroads into the Iberian Peninsula. These wars of expansion, while achieving some notable successes, ultimately drained the Byzantine Empire's resources and strained its military. The vast territories Justinian sought to reclaim required immense financial and human investment, and the wars left the empire vulnerable to other threats. Despite his successes, the legacy of Justinian's military campaigns is a mixed one. While he restored much of the Western Empire's former glory, the prolonged conflicts weakened the empire's ability to defend its borders in the years to come. The territories Justinian reclaimed would later fall again, and the empire would face new challenges as the centuries passed. However, Justinian's wars of expansion remain a defining feature of his reign, demonstrating his ambition and the complex nature of imperial warfare. The Nika riots, which erupted in Constantinople in 532, stand as one of the most significant and dramatic episodes in Byzantine history. The riots, a violent outburst of civil unrest, revealed the deep tensions within the empire and exposed the fragility of imperial authority. What began as a typical chariot race turned into a full-scale insurrection, challenging Justinian's rule and threatening the very stability of the Byzantine Empire. The roots of the Nika riots lay in a combination of factors, from political dissatisfaction to personal grievances. The most immediate spark was a rivalry between 2 factions of chariot racing fans, the Blues and the Greens. These groups, who originally formed to support opposing teams in the Hippodrome, had grown into powerful political forces, wielding significant influence over the common people of Constantinople. While the Blues and Greens were known for their passionate support of their respective charioteers, they also became involved in broader political and social matters. often representing the interests of different segments of the population. In 532, tensions between the factions came to a head. During a chariot race, the two factions united in protest against the imperial administration, particularly against the heavy-handed policies of Justinian's government. The catalyst for the riots was the execution of several members of the Greens who had been implicated in a rebellion a year earlier. The anger over these executions, compounded by broader frustrations with taxation, corruption, and the influence of Justinian's advisors, led to widespread unrest. What began as a protest in the Hippodrome quickly spiraled into full-scale violence. The crowds, now united in their fury, began chanting "Nika," meaning victory, as they rallied against the emperor. The city descended into chaos as rioters took control of the streets, looting, burning, and calling for the overthrow of Justinian. The unrest spread like wildfire, and soon the imperial palace was under threat. The rioters demanded that Justinian abdicate or face the complete destruction of his reign. The emperor, initially taken aback by the scale of the rebellion, was faced with the terrifying prospect of losing control of his empire. His advisors urged him to flee, but Justinian's wife, Empress Theodora, played a crucial role in securing his resolve. With her unyielding support, Justinian chose to confront the insurrection head-on, rather than surrender. He devised a bold plan to strike back at the rioters with a decisive show of force. Justinian ordered his general, Belisarius, to take command of the imperial army and suppress the revolt. In a brutal response, Belisarius and his forces trapped the rioters in the Hippodrome and slaughtered thousands of them, effectively ending the rebellion. The city was left in ruins, but Justinian's authority was restored. The aftermath of the Nika riots, however, left an indelible mark on the empire. The destruction of large parts of Constantinople was followed by a massive rebuilding program, including the construction of the Hagia Sophia, which would become a symbol of imperial power and Christian faith. The Nika riots demonstrated the precariousness of Justinian's reign and the potential for civil unrest to threaten the empire. It also highlighted the role of the emperor's advisors and the influence of the people in shaping the course of Byzantine politics. The riots served as a stark reminder of the volatile relationship between the imperial government and the common citizens of Constantinople, whose support or opposition could make or break an emperor's rule. The reign of Emperor Basil II, often referred to as Basil the Bulgar Slayer, marked a period of profound transformation for the Byzantine Empire, characterized by military prowess, political stability, and territorial expansion. Ascending to the throne in 976, Basil II ruled for nearly half a century, a tenure that was defined by his unyielding determination to restore Byzantine authority and expand its borders. His reign stands as one of the empire's most successful, both militarily and administratively, as he solidified the empire's power and influence across vast swathes of land. Basil's early years on the throne were not without challenges. The empire, having suffered from internal strife and external threats during the previous reign, was in a precarious position. However, Basil was a methodical and ruthless leader who sought to bring the empire under strong central control. His approach was methodical, often favoring calculated diplomacy and strategic alliances, but he was also unafraid to use force when necessary to achieve his goals. The military campaigns of Basil II were instrumental in the empire's success. One of his most significant achievements was the prolonged and brutal conflict with the Bulgarians. Over the course of many years, Basil II meticulously waged war against Tsar Samuel of Bulgaria, whose forces had posed a significant threat to the Byzantine Empire. Basil's military genius and his ability to outlast his enemies were key to his success. After years of conflict, Basil's decisive victory at the Battle of Kleidion in 1014 crippled Bulgarian resistance. Basil's brutal treatment of the captured Bulgarian soldiers, reportedly blinding 15 men, earned him his infamous moniker, and left a lasting mark on the empire's legacy. Basil's success against Bulgaria was followed by the reconquest of much of the empire's former territories. He expanded the Byzantine frontier to include regions such as the southern Balkans and parts of Armenia, restoring Byzantine dominance in areas that had been lost to invaders and rival powers. His military campaigns were backed by a highly disciplined and effective army, one that benefited from Basil's meticulous organization and strict leadership. Beyond his military victories, Basil II's reign was also marked by significant internal reforms. He worked to reduce corruption within the imperial administration, strengthening the empire's economic and political foundations. Basil was a hands-on ruler, deeply involved in the workings of his government, and he worked to ensure that the empire's resources were used effectively. He was also known for his support of the Orthodox Church, which helped strengthen his rule and secure the loyalty of the religious elite. Despite his numerous successes, Basil's reign was not without its challenges. The vastness of his empire required constant vigilance, and his efforts to maintain control over such a diverse and far-reaching realm were a never-ending task. Yet, through his unyielding determination and military acumen, Basil II solidified his place as one of the greatest emperors in Byzantine history, leaving behind an empire that was strong, united, and feared by its enemies. The age of Basil II stands as a testament to the power of strategic leadership and the enduring strength of the Byzantine Empire. The relationship between the Byzantine Empire and the Eastern Orthodox Church was one of mutual influence and intricate interdependence, shaping both the political and religious landscape of the empire for centuries. From its early days, the Byzantine state saw itself not only as a temporal authority but also as a defender and promoter of the Christian faith, and the Church, in turn, became a powerful institution that bolstered the legitimacy and authority of the emperor. In the 4th century, Emperor Constantine's conversion to Christianity marked a pivotal moment in the history of the Byzantine Empire. Constantine's decision to embrace Christianity not only transformed the religious landscape, but also laid the foundation for the Byzantine state's relationship with the Church. With the establishment of Constantinople as the new capital, the empire became the center of Christian orthodoxy, and the emperor took on the role of a protector of the faith. The intertwining of religious and imperial authority was solidified by the concept of Caesaropapism, where the emperor was seen as both a political and religious leader, wielding significant influence over church matters. The relationship between the emperor and the church, however, was not always harmonious. Throughout the history of the Byzantine Empire, theological disputes and doctrinal disagreements often spilled over into the political sphere, leading to tensions between the emperor and church leaders. The most notable of these conflicts was the iconoclast controversy in the 8th and 9th centuries, when Emperor Leo III sought to suppress the veneration of icons, which he considered idolatrous. This move sparked intense opposition from many church leaders, particularly the monks, who saw the veneration of icons as an essential part of Orthodox Christian practice. The dispute led to a series of religious and political upheavals, with some emperors supporting iconoclasm and others championing the veneration of icons. It wasn't until the mid-9th century that the veneration of icons was officially restored, marking the end of the iconoclastic period. Despite such conflicts, the Byzantine Empire continued to view the Church as a central institution in its governance. The emperor played a significant role in ecclesiastical matters, appointing bishops, including the Patriarch of Constantinople, who held considerable influence over the religious life of the empire. The Church, for its part, provided the emperor with divine legitimacy, reinforcing the belief that the emperor was God's chosen ruler on earth. This close relationship between the two institutions also meant that the Church had substantial power in matters of law and governance, with religious figures often acting as advisors to the emperor. The Church also played a key role in the everyday lives of Byzantine citizens. It was not only a spiritual authority but also a social and economic force, with monasteries and churches acting as centers of learning, charity, and wealth. The Orthodox Church provided education, healthcare, and aid to the poor, while also shaping cultural and artistic expression. The Church's influence permeated every aspect of Byzantine society, from its role in shaping the empire's legal system to its control over major political events, such as the coronation of emperors. The relationship between the Byzantine state and the Eastern Orthodox Church was thus both complex and symbiotic, a partnership that helped define the identity of the Byzantine Empire. Though tensions and disagreements arose over the centuries, the enduring bond between church and state played a pivotal role in the longevity and cultural heritage of the Byzantine Empire, leaving a lasting legacy on the Orthodox Christian world. The controversy over the veneration of religious images, or icons, in the Byzantine Empire, known as iconoclasm, stands as one of the most significant and divisive episodes in the empire's history. This conflict, which spanned much of the 8th and 9th centuries, not only had profound religious implications, but also shook the very foundations of Byzantine society, affecting politics, culture, and the relationship between church and state. The origins of iconoclasm can be traced to Emperor Leo III, who in 726 issued an edict that forbade the veneration of icons, declaring that the practice amounted to idolatry. His reasons for this were partly theological, as he believed that the use of images in religious worship violated the biblical commandment against the worship of graven images. However, there were also political motivations behind Leo's decision. The emperor may have seen the veneration of icons as a challenge to his authority, especially since the icons were largely controlled by the church, and particularly by the monks who were strong supporters of their use. By attacking the practice, Leo aimed to weaken the power of the monastic community, which he viewed as politically influential and potentially disloyal. The iconoclastic policy, however, was met with fierce resistance from the church and from the common people. The monks, who were the most ardent defenders of icons, saw the emperor's decree as a direct threat to their spiritual authority and the foundation of Orthodox Christianity. Icons were not simply decorative. They were seen as a means of connecting with the divine, and their veneration was an integral part of religious life. For many, the destruction of icons felt like an assault on the very nature of their faith. Over time, the conflict escalated, with both sides engaging in violent clashes. Churches and monasteries that housed icons were destroyed or repurposed, and monks who resisted the emperor's orders were persecuted. The Pope in Rome, who was aligned with the Byzantine Church, also condemned the policy, further deepening the rift between the East and West. The theological debate around iconoclasm was not limited to the political realm. It extended into doctrinal arguments about the nature of Christ and the role of the material world in Christian salvation. Iconoclasts argued that the use of images was an impediment to true spiritual worship, while iconophiles, those who supported the veneration of icons, maintained that icons were a means of embodying the divine and connecting the faithful to Christ's image. The struggle culminated in a series of reversals of policy. Leo's successors continued his iconoclastic efforts, but in 787, Empress Irene restored the veneration of icons at the Second Council of Nicaea, declaring that it was lawful to venerate images, but not to worship them. This decision was widely accepted by the Church and reaffirmed the legitimacy of icons in Byzantine religious life. However, the debate was not fully settled. The iconoclast movement was revived in the early 9th century under Emperor Theophilus, but after his death, Empress Theodora finally brought an end to iconoclasm in 843, restoring the veneration of icons permanently. Iconoclasm left a deep mark on Byzantine society. It heightened tensions between the emperor and the church, undermined the unity of the empire, and led to a series of theological and political divisions. Despite the eventual restoration of icons, the scars of the conflict persisted, influencing later Byzantine thought and religious practices. The iconoclast controversy not only shaped the future of the Byzantine Empire, but also had a lasting impact on the development of Christian doctrine, particularly in the Eastern Orthodox Church, where the veneration of icons remains a central practice to this day. Byzantine art and architecture stand as some of the most enduring symbols of the empire's cultural and religious legacy. Emerging from the fusion of classical Greco-Roman traditions and Christian influences, Byzantine art maintained a unique style that emphasized spiritual expression over naturalism. Over the centuries, it developed into a distinct artistic tradition that sought to portray the divine through symbolism, abstraction, and vibrant use of color and light. One of the most prominent features of Byzantine art was its iconic mosaics, which adorned the walls and ceilings of churches, palaces, and public buildings. These mosaics were intricate pieces of art, composed of thousands of tiny pieces of glass, stone, or gold leaf, carefully arranged to create detailed and often luminous images. They were used to depict scenes from the Bible, the lives of saints, and the Virgin Mary, with an emphasis on the divine presence. The golden background of many mosaics symbolized the otherworldly realm, making these images appear transcendent and eternal. In the iconic mosaics of Hagia Sophia, for example, the figures of Christ, the Virgin, and the saints are portrayed not in a realistic way, but as ethereal beings whose otherworldly significance is highlighted by the glittering gold that envelops them. Icons, or religious images, were another key element of Byzantine art. These small paintings on wood became objects of veneration in homes and churches, often depicting Christ, the Virgin Mary, and various saints. The creation of icons was not simply an artistic endeavor, but a spiritual practice, as it was believed that the artist, through their careful work, could invite the divine presence into the image. Icons played a central role in religious life, particularly in the Eastern Orthodox Church, where they were seen as windows to the divine, allowing the faithful to connect with the sacred. During the period of iconoclasm, these religious images came under attack, but their significance was eventually reaffirmed with the restoration of icon veneration in the 9th century. Byzantine architecture, particularly in the construction of churches, also reflected the empire's religious devotion and artistic sensibility. The crowning achievement of Byzantine architectural innovation was the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, built under the direction of Emperor Justinian I. Completed in 537, the Hagia Sophia was a marvel of engineering and design, with its massive dome seeming to float above the central nave, an illusion achieved through the use of pendentive triangular sections of a sphere that allowed the circular dome to rest on a square base. The Hagia Sophia's grandeur and size were meant to inspire awe, with its vast interior filled with mosaics, marble columns, and intricate carvings. The building's design blended elements of Roman basilicas with Eastern influences, creating a space that conveyed both the majesty of the emperor and the presence of God. For centuries, it stood as the largest cathedral in the world, a symbol of the Byzantine Empire's power and the spiritual center of the Eastern Orthodox Church. Beyond religious buildings, Byzantine art and architecture had a significant impact on the development of later European art. The emphasis on spiritual themes, the use of gold and vibrant color, and the architectural innovations all left their mark on both the Islamic world and Western Christian traditions. Byzantine mosaics and icons influenced the art of Venice, and the architectural principles developed in Constantinople were echoed in churches and palaces across Europe. Despite the eventual decline of the empire, Byzantine art and architecture continued to inspire and shape religious and cultural practices in the centuries that followed. The Byzantine Empire's administrative system was a highly organized and intricate structure that evolved over centuries to maintain control over a vast and diverse territory. At the heart of this system was the emperor, who held absolute power, regarded as God's representative on earth. The emperor's role was both secular and spiritual, guiding the empire's policies, overseeing military affairs, and enforcing religious orthodoxy. The Byzantine emperor was often seen as the ultimate authority on legal, political, and military matters, embodying the idea of a divinely ordained ruler who was responsible for the welfare of both the empire and the church. While the emperor held considerable power, their authority was often balanced by the highly developed bureaucracy that permeated all levels of governance. The Byzantine bureaucracy was one of the most sophisticated administrative systems in the medieval world, relying on a vast network of officials and offices to manage the empire's vast territories. At the top of this bureaucratic hierarchy were high-ranking officials such as the praetorian prefects, who governed provinces, and the logothetes, who oversaw financial and legal matters. The empire was divided into administrative regions called themes, each headed by a strategos, military governor, who was responsible for both the civil administration and the defense of the region. This combination of civil and military authority in the hands of one individual was a crucial feature of Byzantine governance, especially during times of external threats. The Byzantine army played a significant role in maintaining the stability of the empire, and its leaders were deeply integrated into the political and administrative system. Military leaders, including the domestikos ton skolon, commander of the army, and the magister militum, military magistrate, wielded significant influence and often held considerable power within the court. The emperor would frequently rely on these generals to secure loyalty from the military and ensure the defense of the empire's borders. The Byzantine military was uniquely structured to deal with the empire's decentralized and often volatile nature, with local militias and fortifications being a key part of its defense strategy. The bureaucracy itself was a finely tuned machine, with each level of administration overseeing specific aspects of life within the empire. The Bureau of the Palace, for instance, handled the imperial court's daily affairs and diplomatic relations, while the fiscus, responsible for managing the imperial treasury, ensured the empire's finances were maintained. Much of the empire's success relied on its ability to collect taxes efficiently and to regulate trade, commerce, and agriculture through an extensive network of bureaucrats, inspectors, and local officials. While the emperor was at the pinnacle of power, their role was balanced by the intricate relationships with the church and the aristocracy. The close connection between the state and the Eastern Orthodox Church, especially after the Emperor Constantine's establishment of Christianity as the state religion, meant that religious leaders often had considerable influence over political matters. The church, through its bishops and patriarchs, could shape policies, especially regarding matters of doctrine and imperial legitimacy. In essence, Byzantine governance was marked by a complex fusion of military, religious, and bureaucratic authority. The emperor's absolute control was tempered by the vast, intricate network of officials and military leaders who ensured that the empire functioned smoothly despite its vast territorial expanse and the pressures of external invasions and internal strife. This combination of central authority and bureaucratic efficiency made the Byzantine Empire one of the longest-lasting empires in history. The rise of Islam in the 7th century posed one of the greatest challenges to the Byzantine Empire, shaking the very foundations of its territorial control and religious dominance. The spread of Islam was swift and relentless, beginning with the Prophet Muhammad's revelations in the early 600s and expanding rapidly across the Arabian Peninsula. The Byzantine Empire, already facing internal pressures and external threats, found itself confronted by a new and powerful force that would reshape the geopolitical landscape of the Eastern Mediterranean. The first encounters between the Byzantine Empire and the newly formed Islamic forces were marked by conflict over territories that were critical to both empires. The Byzantine-controlled regions of Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, which were rich in resources and strategic importance, became prime targets for the Muslim armies under the Rashidun Caliphate. The Battle of Yarmouk in 636 AD was a turning point. where the Byzantine army suffered a catastrophic defeat. This loss led to the collapse of Byzantine control over Syria and Palestine, marking the beginning of the empire's retreat from its once expansive territories in the eastern Mediterranean. As the Islamic caliphates rapidly expanded, the Byzantine Empire found itself engaged in a series of ongoing military confrontations. The loss of such vital regions was a blow not only to the empire's economic and military strength, but also to its prestige. The loss of Jerusalem in 637 AD to the Muslims was a particularly painful blow, as the city held immense religious significance for both Christianity and Judaism, as well as for the Byzantine Empire itself. The fall of Jerusalem to the Muslims represented the beginning of the end for Byzantine control in the Holy Land. Despite these early setbacks, the Byzantines under Emperor Heraclius tried to reorganize their defenses and counter the Islamic threat. Heraclius led a series of military campaigns to reclaim some of the lost territories, but the Islamic armies, under the leadership of Caliph Umar and later Caliph Muawiyah, proved to be formidable opponents. The caliphates, motivated by religious fervor and unified by a strong sense of purpose, continued to press into Byzantine territory, further destabilizing the empire's eastern provinces. However, the Byzantine Empire did not completely succumb to the Islamic wave. Over time, the conflict between the two powers evolved from open warfare into a more nuanced struggle. The Byzantines, while losing large portions of land, managed to maintain control of key territories such as Anatolia and parts of the Balkans. The empire's stronghold in the eastern Mediterranean, its navy, and its fortified cities, such as Constantinople, became central to Byzantine survival in the face of Islamic expansion. The rise of Islam did not only pose military and territorial challenges, but also created a cultural and religious divide that shaped Byzantine history for centuries. The spread of Islam transformed the religious and social fabric of the regions that had once been under Byzantine rule, and the empire's interaction with the Muslim world would continue to influence its policies and outlook. The Byzantine Empire would endure the Islamic threat for centuries, adapting to a new reality where its eastern borders were constantly in flux, and its Christian identity increasingly came into conflict with the growing presence of Islam in the Mediterranean world. The Arab invasions of the 7th century marked a decisive chapter in the history of the Byzantine Empire, as the rapid expansion of the newly founded Islamic caliphates threatened the empire's territorial integrity and power. Beginning shortly after the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632 AD, the Arabs, under the Rashidun Caliphate, launched a series of military campaigns that swept through the Byzantine-controlled regions of the Levant, North Africa, and parts of Asia Minor, fundamentally altering the map of the eastern Mediterranean. The first major blow to the Byzantine Empire came with the loss of Syria and Palestine. These regions, vital both strategically and economically, were rich in resources and had great religious significance. In 636 AD, the Battle of Yarmouk, a decisive encounter between the Byzantine and Muslim forces, resulted in a devastating defeat for the Byzantines. The loss of Syria to the Arabs was not just a military setback, but a profound shift in the balance of power in the region. Jerusalem, once under Byzantine control, fell to the Muslims soon after, symbolizing the loss of a major religious and cultural center. Following their successes in the Levant, the Arab armies moved westward into North Africa, where they swiftly conquered Egypt in 641 AD. The fall of Egypt was particularly damaging to the Byzantine Empire, as it had long served as a vital grain supplier to Constantinople. The Muslims' control over Egypt also provided them with access to the Mediterranean and established a foothold for further expansion into the empire's African territories. The loss of these crucial provinces left the Byzantine Empire in a precarious position, especially as the Arab forces continued their rapid advance. However, despite the setbacks, the Byzantines were not entirely defeated. Emperor Heraclius, who had led the empire through earlier struggles, made concerted efforts to reorganize and defend the remaining Byzantine territories. The empire shifted its focus to its remaining strongholds, such as Anatolia and Constantinople, which were more defensible. The Arabs' next target was Asia Minor, a region of immense importance for the empire. The Byzantine response, although initially disorganized, was not without resilience. The defense of the empire's core territory, particularly the fortified city of Constantinople, became the focus of Byzantine efforts. By the early 8th century, the Arab forces had made inroads into Asia Minor, but the Byzantines managed to regroup and stymie the Arab advance, particularly following the failed siege of Constantinople in 718 AD. This failure, aided by the Byzantine strategic use of Greek fire, a deadly incendiary weapon, marked a turning point. The Arabs were forced to retreat, and the threat of further expansion into Europe was temporarily halted. Despite these victories, the Byzantines had been irrevocably altered by the Arab invasions. The empire's vast territories in the east had been significantly reduced, and its role in the Mediterranean world was no longer as dominant as it once was. However, the Byzantines' ability to defend Constantinople and parts of Asia Minor preserved the empire's existence for several centuries. The Arab invasions not only reshaped the borders of the Byzantine Empire, but also contributed to the evolution of its military, political, and religious identity in the centuries that followed. The Battle of Manzikert in 1071 stands as one of the most significant and devastating events in the history of the Byzantine Empire, marking the beginning of a long period of decline. The battle was fought between the Byzantine forces, led by Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes, and the Seljuk Turks, commanded by Sultan Alp Arslan. The Seljuks, who had been expanding their influence in the region, decisively defeated the Byzantine army near the town of Manzikert, located in modern-day eastern Turkey. The defeat at Manzikert was the culmination of a series of military and political missteps by the Byzantine Empire. Romanos IV Diogenes, eager to assert Byzantine control over the eastern frontier and halt the Seljuk advances into Anatolia, sought to confront the Turks in battle. The Byzantine army, though numerically superior, was undermined by internal divisions and a lack of cohesion. The emperor's decision to hastily move his army into a vulnerable position, coupled with logistical challenges, led to a disorganized and poorly coordinated fight. When the battle began, the Byzantine forces were caught off guard, and several key units, including the elite Varangian Guard, were left vulnerable. In the chaos of the battle, many of Romanos's allies, including mercenaries, abandoned the battlefield, and the Byzantine emperor was forced to surrender to Alp Arslan. The defeat had far-reaching consequences for the empire. Most immediately, the loss of Manzikert allowed the Seljuks to secure a stronghold in Anatolia, a region that had been the lifeblood of the Byzantine Empire for centuries. The Turks established their presence in the heart of Anatolia, which was crucial not only militarily, but also economically. As the Seljuks began to settle in the region, the Byzantines found it increasingly difficult to maintain their control over what had once been a vital part of their territory. In the aftermath of the battle, the Byzantine Empire was left in disarray. Emperor Romanos IV was taken captive, and his reign ended abruptly. His defeat at Manzikert sparked political turmoil back in Constantinople, where a series of coups and civil wars followed. The weakening of imperial authority led to the fragmentation of the Byzantine state, and the loss of large swaths of territory to the Seljuks was a blow from which the empire would never fully recover. The loss of Anatolia to the Seljuks not only drained the Byzantine Empire's military and economic resources, but also opened the door for future invasions by the Turks and other powers. By the end of the 11th century, much of the region was lost, and the Byzantines were increasingly relegated to the city of Constantinople, with their once great empire now reduced to a shadow of its former self. The Battle of Manzikert thus marked the beginning of the end for Byzantine dominance in the east and set the stage for the rise of the Ottoman Empire centuries later. The relationship between the Byzantine Empire and the Crusaders was fraught with complexity and tension, marked by moments of cooperation, suspicion, and eventual betrayal. Initially, the Byzantine Empire saw the Crusades as a means of securing assistance against its numerous enemies, particularly the Seljuk Turks and later the expanding Ottoman Empire. However, as the Crusaders made their way eastward, their goals and methods often clashed with the interests of the Byzantine Empire, leading to a strained relationship that would culminate in one of the most disastrous events in Byzantine history, the sack of Constantinople in 1204. The First Crusade, launched in 1096, was initially welcomed by the Byzantines, as the Crusaders' aim was to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control. The Byzantine emperor at the time, Alexios I Komnenos, hoped to use the Crusaders as a buffer against the Turks, whose forces had been steadily encroaching upon Byzantine territory. However, despite providing logistical support and safe passage for the Crusader armies, the Byzantines and the Crusaders had differing objectives. The Crusaders were focused on their religious mission to capture Jerusalem, while the Byzantines viewed the Crusades through a more pragmatic lens, seeking to use the Western forces to restore lost territories. The relationship began to sour when the Crusaders, after capturing Antioch in 1098, began to establish their own Latin kingdoms in the Levant, rather than returning the territory to Byzantine control as originally agreed upon. The Byzantine Empire, under Alexios I, was left increasingly marginalized as the Crusaders pursued their own agendas, and tensions grew over the issue of territorial control and the treatment of Byzantine interests in the region. By the time of the Fourth Crusade in 1204, the relationship between the Byzantines and the Crusaders had deteriorated further. The crusade, initially intended to recapture Jerusalem, was diverted to Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire, after a series of political manipulations and promises of monetary rewards. The Crusaders, having been promised the throne of the Byzantine Empire by a pretender named Alexios IV Angelos, were lured into an assault on Constantinople. In April 1204, the Crusaders breached the walls of Constantinople after a brutal siege. The sack of Constantinople was one of the most devastating events in Byzantine history, as the Crusaders looted and desecrated the city's magnificent churches, including the Hagia Sophia, and carried off immense wealth. The city's inhabitants were massacred, and the imperial family was overthrown. The Latin Crusaders established a short-lived Latin empire in Constantinople, but their rule was weak, and the city itself would remain fragmented for over half a century. The sack effectively crippled the Byzantine Empire, which was never able to fully recover from the loss of its capital and the devastation wrought by the Crusaders. The sack of Constantinople in 1204 not only shattered the Byzantine Empire, but also permanently altered the relationship between the Eastern and Western Christian worlds. The Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church, already divided for centuries, grew even more estranged after the sack, as the Crusaders' actions were seen as a betrayal of Christian unity. The Byzantines would never forget the violence inflicted upon their city, and the legacy of the Fourth Crusade became a symbol of the deep divide between the Latin West and the Greek East. The Fourth Crusade, launched in 1202, was intended to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control, but it ended up causing one of the most catastrophic events in Byzantine history. The Crusaders, instead of focusing on their original goal in the Holy Land, were diverted by a complex series of political maneuvers and promises, which ultimately led them to Constantinople. The decision to target the heart of the Byzantine Empire, rather than pursuing the liberation of Jerusalem, would have disastrous consequences for both the Crusaders and the Byzantine Empire. The Crusaders, who had initially been promised support from the Byzantine Empire, found themselves embroiled in internal political disputes. Alexios IV Angelos, a Byzantine prince, promised the Crusaders financial aid and military support if they helped him reclaim the throne from his uncle, Alexios III, who had deposed him. The Crusaders, motivated by the promise of rewards and eager to pay off their growing debts, agreed to help. However, upon reaching Constantinople in 1203, the situation quickly escalated. Alexios IV was restored to the throne, but his rule was unstable and unpopular, which caused tension between the Crusaders and the citizens of Constantinople. The situation grew even more volatile as the Crusaders, burdened by their unpaid debt and the lack of any significant rewards, began to demand more from the Byzantine Empire. In April 1204, after a series of political and military failures, the Crusaders, frustrated and desperate for compensation, launched a full-scale assault on Constantinople. The siege of the city was brutal, and the Crusaders managed to breach the walls of the city after a prolonged battle. Once inside, they unleashed a terrifying wave of destruction upon the once great city. Churches, including the Hagia Sophia, were desecrated, and priceless relics and treasures were looted. The citizens of Constantinople, caught off guard and unprepared for such a betrayal, were massacred. The once mighty Byzantine Empire was shattered, and the Latin Empire was established in Constantinople. The sack of Constantinople in 1204 marked a profound turning point in the history of the Byzantine Empire. The loss of the capital, along with the immense cultural and economic devastation that followed, left the Byzantine Empire in disarray. The Latin Empire, although short-lived, ruled over the remnants of the Byzantine territory for the next several decades, but it was never able to secure the same strength or influence as the original Byzantine Empire. The Crusaders' actions during the Fourth Crusade deeply scarred the relationship between the Eastern and Western Christian worlds, leaving a permanent rift between the Orthodox and Catholic churches. Despite the trauma of 1204, the Byzantine Empire was not entirely finished. While Constantinople lay in ruins, the remnants of the Byzantine state continued to exist in smaller territories, such as Nicaea, Epirus, and Trebizond. These successor states would eventually reclaim Constantinople in 1261, but the once dominant Byzantine Empire would never fully recover from the devastation wrought by the Fourth Crusade. The fall of Constantinople in 1204 was a tragedy that sealed the fate of the empire, setting in motion a series of events that would lead to its final collapse under Ottoman rule in 1453. Following the devastating sack of Constantinople in 1204, the Byzantine Empire appeared to be a shadow of its former self. The Latin Empire, established in the aftermath of the Fourth Crusade, controlled the city, and the Byzantine state was scattered across several smaller territories. However, the recovery of Constantinople in 1261 marked the beginning of the empire's slow, yet remarkable, attempt to rebuild under the Palaiologos dynasty. The restoration began when Michael VIII Palaiologos, a skilled and ambitious military leader, seized the opportunity to regain Constantinople from the Latin Crusaders. In 1261, after nearly 60 years of Latin rule, Michael's forces successfully retook the city. The Latin Empire had weakened over time, suffering from internal divisions and external pressure, which made it ripe for the taking. The restoration of Constantinople to Byzantine rule was a momentous event, symbolizing a return to the past. But the Byzantine Empire that Michael inherited was a far cry from its former glory. Although the Palaiologos dynasty had re-established the capital, the empire's territory was reduced and its resources significantly depleted. The military, once a proud force, was in disarray, and the economy, ravaged by years of instability, needed urgent revitalization. Nevertheless, Michael VIII and his successors worked tirelessly to stabilize the empire, and despite the many challenges they faced, they did succeed in some of their rebuilding efforts. One of Michael's first tasks was to reassert control over the Aegean and parts of Asia Minor, reclaiming lost territories Yet, this recovery was slow, and the Byzantine Empire was never able to regain its full territorial extent. The empire, weakened by both external invasions and internal conflicts, remained small and isolated. Michael also sought to strengthen the empire's relations with the West, attempting to mend the rift caused by the Fourth Crusade. In 1274, the Council of Lyon briefly rekindled attempts at reconciliation between the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church, though this was met with strong resistance from the population, who resented the idea of union with Rome. Despite the restoration of Constantinople and some early successes, the Palaiologos dynasty's reign was marked by continuous struggles. The empire faced numerous external threats, most notably from the rising power of the Ottoman Turks. While the Palaiologos rulers managed to retain Constantinople, the territory surrounding the city gradually fell to the Ottomans. The empire's military power remained limited, and its economic base remained fragile. The constant threat of invasion from the Ottomans loomed large, casting a shadow over the empire's recovery efforts. Although the Byzantine Empire under the Palaiologos dynasty succeeded in temporarily rebuilding its strength and recovering Constantinople, it was an empire in decline. The final collapse would come in 1453, when the Ottomans, having gradually encroached on the remaining Byzantine territories, finally captured Constantinople, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire. The Palaiologos dynasty's efforts to rebuild, while significant, could not prevent the inevitable, and the once proud empire fell to its powerful Turkish neighbors. Yet, the legacy of the Byzantine Empire, shaped by its art, architecture, and culture, would live on, influencing the future of both the Eastern Mediterranean and the wider world. The rise of the Ottoman Empire marked one of the most significant threats to the Byzantine Empire. As the Byzantines struggled to recover from the sack of Constantinople in 1204 and subsequent years of fragmentation, a new power was emerging in the east. The Ottomans, initially a small Turkish principality, steadily expanded their territory across Asia Minor, fueled by a combination of military prowess and strategic alliances. By the mid-14th century, the Byzantine Empire was already in a weakened state, with reduced territory and a dwindling population, making it especially vulnerable to Ottoman expansion. Under the leadership of Osman I, the Ottomans began their ascent in the early 14th century. They capitalized on the weakening Byzantine Empire, which was losing control over crucial territories in Asia Minor. The Ottomans, initially concentrated in the region around Bursa, gradually pushed westward, seizing Byzantine territories one after another. Their military success was built on an efficient system of organized forces, including the feared Janissaries, an elite corps of infantrymen who were highly trained and loyal to their sultan. As the Ottoman Empire expanded, its rulers turned their attention to the Byzantine heartland itself. By the early 15th century, Constantinople, the jewel of the Byzantine Empire, was surrounded on nearly all sides by Ottoman territory. The Byzantines, already weakened by internal strife, could do little to stop the Ottoman juggernaut. The Ottomans, with their increasingly powerful military and strategic position, grew bolder in their quest for total control of the Byzantine territories. The fall of key cities, such as Nicomedia and Nicaea to the Ottomans, was a sign of things to come. As the Ottoman forces advanced into the Balkans, they began to threaten the very existence of the Byzantine Empire. By the time Sultan Mehmed II ascended to the throne in 1444, he was determined to put an end to the Byzantine presence in Constantinople. The Ottomans had already conquered significant portions of the Byzantine Empire, but the final goal was always the capture of the imperial capital. Constantinople, with its strategically advantageous position between Europe and Asia, remained the prize that eluded Ottoman conquest for centuries. But the Byzantine Empire, under the leadership of Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, was increasingly isolated. The Western powers, grappling with their own issues, were unwilling or unable to provide significant aid to the embattled Byzantines. The Ottomans, by contrast, had expanded their influence across the Mediterranean, securing alliances with various other powers and presenting an unyielding force. The rise of the Ottoman Empire, with its growing military might and unrelenting push into Byzantine territory, created a sense of inevitability about the fall of Constantinople. Despite their resilience, the Byzantines were unable to hold back the Ottoman tide. By the time of the final siege in 1453, the Byzantine Empire, already on its last legs, could do little to defend itself. The Ottomans' rise to power had become an unstoppable force, and the fate of the Byzantine Empire was sealed. Constantinople fell to Sultan Mehmed II on May 29, 1453, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire and the beginning of the Ottoman domination of the Eastern Mediterranean. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 marked the tragic end of the Byzantine Empire and was the culmination of decades of Ottoman pressure on the once mighty capital. For nearly a century, the Byzantine Empire had been shrinking, its territory reduced to little more than the city itself, with few allies left in the west. The Ottomans, led by Sultan Mehmed II, had steadily encroached on Byzantine holdings, and the city's strategic position between Europe and Asia made it the final target in their campaign of expansion. The situation in Constantinople by 1453 was desperate. The city's population had dwindled, and its resources were stretched thin. Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, the last Byzantine emperor, was well aware that without significant help from the West, the city stood little chance against the Ottoman forces. Efforts to secure aid had been largely unsuccessful, with European powers preoccupied with their own concerns or unwilling to intervene. The Roman Catholic Church, which had long been in theological conflict with the Eastern Orthodox Church, offered little support, and the promised military reinforcements from the West never materialized. The Ottoman siege began in April 1453, with Sultan Mehmed II leading an army that reportedly numbered around 100 men, a formidable force compared to the Byzantine defenders. The city's walls, though ancient and once impenetrable, were aging and in need of repair. However, the defenders were determined, and Emperor Constantine XI remained resolute, despite knowing the odds were against him. The Byzantines made preparations as best they could, attempting to fortify the walls and gather supplies, but they were outnumbered and outmatched. The Ottomans brought an array of siege weapons, including massive cannons that could batter down the city's formidable walls. Mehmed's forces launched a relentless bombardment, weakening the Byzantine defenses. The massive cannon, known as the basilica, was a technological marvel of its time and played a crucial role in the eventual breach of the walls. Despite the fierce resistance from the Byzantines, including a heroic defense by the city's soldiers and citizens, the walls began to crumble under the sustained pressure of the Ottoman artillery. As the siege wore on, the defenders grew weary, and food and water supplies began to run low. In contrast, the Ottomans, with their abundant resources and reinforcements, remained well supplied. Mehmed's forces were also aided by naval superiority, effectively cutting off any possible escape or relief for the Byzantines. The final blow came when, after weeks of bombardment, the Ottomans managed to breach the walls on May 29, 1453. The fall of Constantinople was swift and brutal. The Ottomans poured into the city, and despite a last-ditch effort to defend the heart of the city, the Byzantines were overwhelmed. Emperor Constantine XI, fighting valiantly at the city's gates, died in battle, symbolizing the final fall of the Byzantine Empire. The city was looted, and its great churches, including the Hagia Sophia, were converted into mosques. The capture of Constantinople marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and the beginning of an era of Ottoman dominance in the Eastern Mediterranean. The siege and its aftermath left a deep imprint on history, signaling the end of one civilization and the rise of another. The fall of Constantinople also had profound implications for Europe, as it disrupted trade routes and sent ripples of change across the continent. It was a turning point that reshaped the geopolitical landscape of the region forever. Constantine XI Palaiologos, the last emperor of the Byzantine Empire, stands as a tragic figure in history, remembered for his unyielding determination and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Born into the Palaiologos dynasty, Constantine's reign began in 1449, at a time when the Byzantine Empire was but a shadow of its former self. The once mighty empire had been reduced to the city of Constantinople, surrounded by the expanding Ottoman Empire on all sides, with only a handful of allies left in the west. As the Ottoman threat loomed larger, Constantine XI sought desperately to defend the city he loved. His reign was defined by his tireless efforts to rally support and bolster the city's defenses. However, the Byzantine Empire's fortunes had long since turned. By the time Constantine ascended the throne, the empire had been in decline for centuries. The Western powers, preoccupied with their own concerns, offered little in the way of aid. Despite this, Constantine refused to surrender, and he remained determined to protect the Byzantine capital to his last breath. As Sultan Mehmed II's forces began their siege of Constantinople in 1453, Constantine XI did everything he could to prepare for the inevitable. He strengthened the city's ancient walls, though they had become vulnerable after centuries of wear. He called for reinforcements from the west, but the response was minimal, and the help that did arrive was far too little to make a difference. Constantine, with a small army of defenders that included mercenaries from various European countries, faced an enemy that vastly outnumbered him. The siege began in early April, and by May, the city's defences were being relentlessly bombarded by Ottoman cannons. Constantine XI fought alongside his soldiers, often seen manning the battlements himself, encouraging his men and maintaining their morale in the face of the growing despair. As the walls of Constantinople began to crumble under the weight of the Ottoman siege, Constantine knew the city was nearing its breaking point. The emperor's final stand was marked by desperation but also unwavering resolve. As the Ottomans breached the city's defences on May 29, 1453, Constantine XI's fate was sealed. He refused to abandon his people, choosing instead to die with them. Fighting valiantly at the city's walls, he was eventually overwhelmed by Ottoman forces. His body was never found, and it is said that Constantine died without a throne, his last moments marking the tragic end of the Byzantine Empire. The fall of Constantinople and the death of Constantine XI signified the collapse of a civilization that had once stood at the crossroads of Europe and Asia for over 1,000 years. His death brought an end to the Byzantine Empire, but his courage and steadfastness in the face of certain defeat have cemented his legacy as a symbol of resistance and honor. In the annals of history, Constantine XI's final stand remains one of the most poignant moments of heroism, a testament to the enduring spirit of the Byzantine Empire. Even in its last days, the fall of Constantinople in 1453 marked the definitive end of the Byzantine Empire, and its consequences reverberated throughout the Eastern Mediterranean and the Christian world for centuries. The Ottoman victory not only solidified the rise of the Ottoman Empire, but also fundamentally altered the balance of power, trade routes, and religious dynamics across Europe, Asia, and Africa. The immediate effect of the conquest was the consolidation of Ottoman control over the entire region. The city of Constantinople, once a beacon of Christian civilization and the center of the Orthodox Church, became the new Ottoman capital, renamed Istanbul. This shift in power created a vast, centralized empire, stretching from the Balkans to the Middle East and beyond, ushering in an era of Ottoman dominance in the Eastern Mediterranean. As the Ottomans expanded their territories, they reshaped the political landscape, influencing the course of European and Middle Eastern history for centuries. For the Christian world, the fall of Constantinople was a devastating blow. The loss of the last remnant of the Eastern Roman Empire left the Christian East vulnerable to Islamic expansion. The Orthodox Christian population, once protected under the Byzantine imperial system, found itself under Ottoman rule, facing the challenges of conversion, religious restrictions, and the erosion of their cultural and political identity. Churches were converted into mosques, and the Christian population faced increasing pressure to assimilate into the Ottoman system. However, the Greek Orthodox Church managed to retain some autonomy, as the Ottomans recognized its role in administering the Christian population. Though under their watchful eye, the fall of Constantinople also had profound implications for the European powers. The Ottomans now controlled key trade routes between Europe and Asia, cutting off access to vital resources such as silk, spices, and other luxury goods. This disruption led to the search for new maritime routes, ultimately spurring the age of exploration. Portuguese and Spanish explorers, driven by the desire to bypass Ottoman-controlled lands, sought alternative routes to the east, leading to the discovery of new territories and the establishment of European colonial empires. In the immediate aftermath, the Christian kingdoms of Europe, particularly the Catholic West, were alarmed by the rise of the Ottoman Empire. The fall of Constantinople was seen as a warning, and the idea of a unified Christian front to repel the Ottomans began to take root. The sense of urgency to protect Europe from Ottoman expansion led to the formation of alliances and coalitions, though these efforts were often short-lived and fragmented. The Pope and various European monarchs called for a crusade to reclaim Constantinople, but these appeals were met with limited response. The cultural and intellectual impact of Constantinople's fall was also significant. Many Greek scholars, fleeing the Ottoman occupation, found refuge in Italy, bringing with them valuable manuscripts, knowledge, and a deep understanding of ancient Greek and Roman texts. This influx of classical knowledge helped ignite the Renaissance, a period of cultural rebirth that deeply influenced European art, science, and philosophy. The fall of Constantinople thus marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. While the Ottomans established their empire as the dominant power in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Christian world was left to reckon with the loss of a great civilization and the shifting tides of history. The effects of this momentous event would shape the course of European politics, trade, and culture for generations to come. Byzantine intellectual life was a beacon of classical knowledge during a time when much of the Western world was plunged into the chaos of the Dark Ages. Although the Byzantine Empire would eventually fall, its scholars preserved and transmitted the intellectual legacy of ancient Greece and Rome, which later played a crucial role in sparking the Renaissance. This preservation of knowledge was not only about keeping ancient texts alive, but also about maintaining the philosophical, theological, and scientific thought that had defined the Greco-Roman world for centuries. Byzantine scholars took on the monumental task of copying, studying, and annotating the works of classical philosophers, historians, scientists, and poets. They made painstaking efforts to keep these texts from being lost to history, even as the world around them struggled with political instability and frequent invasions. Notably, the preservation of ancient Greek and Latin texts became a cornerstone of Byzantine education, and the elite class of Byzantine intellectuals often operated within a tradition that married classical learning with Christian theology. The works of Aristotle, Plato, and other classical philosophers were not only preserved, but also carefully interpreted in light of Christian teachings, forging a unique intellectual tradition that blended pagan antiquity with the burgeoning Christian worldview. The role of the Byzantine Empire in preserving knowledge was especially significant in the fields of science, medicine, and philosophy. Byzantium scholars built upon the works of earlier scholars like Galen and Ptolemy, maintaining sophisticated systems of medical knowledge and astronomical observations. The intellectual life in Constantinople, centered around the imperial court and monasteries, was rich with discussions on philosophy, law, and natural sciences, while scholars like Michael Psellus and John Italus engaged deeply with the works of Aristotle and other ancient philosophers. In addition to their intellectual contributions, Byzantine scholars also played an instrumental role in the preservation and spread of classical texts. The famous Library of Constantinople housed many of the world's most important manuscripts, and scholars worked tirelessly to copy and preserve these precious works. As the Ottoman threat grew in the 15th century, many of these manuscripts, along with the scholars who had safeguarded them, sought refuge in the West, bringing with them centuries of accumulated learning. This influx of Byzantine knowledge had a profound impact on the intellectual climate of Renaissance Italy. The scholars fleeing from Constantinople, particularly after the fall of the city in 1453, brought with them Greek texts that had been virtually unknown in Western Europe for centuries. These scholars reintroduced classical philosophy, history, and science to a Europe on the cusp of intellectual rebirth. The Renaissance, with its renewed focus on humanism and the classics, was profoundly shaped by this influx of Byzantine scholarship, which gave rise to a revival of the ideals of ancient Greece and Rome. Thus, the Byzantine Empire played a pivotal role in preserving the intellectual heritage of the classical world. Through its scholars, manuscripts, and educational systems, it ensured that the treasures of antiquity were not lost to the ravages of time. When the Renaissance dawned in Italy, it was, in many ways, the Byzantine legacy that helped ignite the spark of intellectual renewal in Europe. Education in the Byzantine Empire was a vital force in the preservation of knowledge, the transmission of culture, and the advancement of the empire's intellectual life. The Byzantine system of learning, deeply rooted in the classical traditions of Greece and Rome, was not just about the pursuit of knowledge, but also about serving the spiritual and administrative needs of the empire. Education was predominantly centered in two key institutions, the monasteries and the imperial schools, both of which had a profound impact on the development of Byzantine society. Monasteries played an essential role in Byzantine education. With the rise of Christianity, monasteries became not only religious centers, but also cultural hubs that preserved the ancient learning of the Greek and Roman worlds. Monks, who dedicated their lives to study and prayer, often took on the responsibility of copying manuscripts, ensuring the survival of many classical works that might otherwise have been lost. In addition to their religious duties, monks were also scholars and teachers. They wrote commentaries on the Bible, translated ancient texts, and continued the intellectual work of Greek philosophers. Their scholarly pursuits ensured the continuity of knowledge during a time when many other parts of Europe were struggling with the decline of literacy and learning. The monasteries, often located in the hills and remote areas of the empire, also provided a safe haven for education, protecting it from the political instability and invasions that periodically threatened the empire. Imperial schools, particularly those in Constantinople, were another important center of Byzantine education. These institutions were often attached to the palace or associated with the imperial administration. The most famous of these was the University of Constantinople, which was founded in the 5th century. The school offered a wide range of subjects, including rhetoric, law, philosophy, and theology, and was attended by the young elite of the Byzantine world. Students at these institutions were trained in the classics, and their education was grounded in the teachings of Greek philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle, as well as Christian thought. Rhetoric, as a means of effective communication and persuasion, was particularly valued, and many students would go on to serve as imperial officials, diplomats, or clerics. The curriculum at the University of Constantinople was structured around a blend of classical learning and Christian teachings, which helped shape the intellectual identity of the empire. The subjects studied were rigorous, and graduates were often highly skilled in philosophy, theology, and law, playing crucial roles in the imperial bureaucracy and in the church. The study of grammar, dialectic, and logic was designed to equip students with the ability to debate, reason, and solve problem skills that were highly valued in the imperial administration and ecclesiastical hierarchy. Despite the challenges posed by external threats and internal turmoil, education remained a cornerstone of Byzantine society. Whether in the seclusion of a monastery or the halls of an imperial school, the pursuit of knowledge was seen as both a divine calling and a civic duty. Byzantine education thus ensured that learning, cultural heritage, and intellectual pursuits continued to flourish, leaving a lasting legacy that would influence the course of European history for centuries to come. Byzantine music and liturgy formed a cornerstone of the empire's religious and cultural identity, reflecting the deep connection between the sacred and the imperial. The Byzantine Empire's music was largely centered around the church, where liturgical practices played a pivotal role in the lives of its people. It was through these religious ceremonies that music served both to enhance spiritual experiences and to solidify the empire's Christian character. The development of Byzantine liturgical music, most notably chant, shaped the evolution of church practices and provided a lasting influence on the religious music traditions of Eastern Christianity. At the heart of Byzantine music was the divine liturgy, the central form of worship in the Orthodox Church. This sacred service was deeply entrenched in the traditions of the early Christian Church, but evolved significantly within the context of the Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine liturgical tradition placed great importance on the use of music to express divine beauty, truth, and the presence of God. Music was viewed not merely as an art form, but as a medium through which the faithful could experience the presence of the divine and elevate their spiritual lives. The sacred nature of this music was intended to transcend human experience and bring the worshipper into closer communion with God. The most significant development in Byzantine music was the creation of Byzantine chant. Unlike the polyphonic choral music of the West, Byzantine chant remained monophonic, with a single melodic line sung by a choir or cantor. This chant was designed to be simple yet deeply evocative, with a focus on enhancing the theological meaning of the words, rather than the complexity of musical arrangements. The melodies were structured to match the rhythms of the texts, giving the words a natural, flowing quality. This was in keeping with the Christian emphasis on the divine word and the reverence in which the sacred texts were held. One of the key elements of Byzantine chant was its use of modes, a system of scales that governed the melody and rhythm of the music. These modes were drawn from ancient Greek musical theory, but over time they became more codified and adapted to the needs of Christian liturgy. The most well-known system was the octoechos, a structure based on 8 distinct modes, each with its own particular character and mood. The octoechos provided the foundation for most of the liturgical music of the Byzantine Church, and its influence extended far beyond the empire, impacting the musical practices of the Slavic Orthodox churches as well. The liturgical music was not limited to the church service itself, but permeated all aspects of Byzantine religious life. Processions, feasts, and other religious observances often featured chanting, and special hymns were composed for the celebration of specific events in the liturgical calendar, such as the Feast of the Nativity or Pascha, Easter. The hymns and chants were designed to convey the theological significance of these events and to guide the worshippers in their spiritual journey. Byzantine liturgical music also played an important role in shaping the empire's cultural life. As a reflection of the Christian faith and the imperial authority that upheld it, it was intricately linked to the identity of the Byzantine people. The music of the church was not only a means of worship, but also a powerful expression of the Byzantine Empire's spiritual and cultural legacy, one that would continue to influence Eastern Orthodox liturgies for centuries to come. Byzantine law and justice were pivotal in shaping not only the administration of the Byzantine Empire, but also the foundation of legal principles that would later influence the development of modern legal systems. One of the most enduring legacies of the Byzantine Empire was its legal traditions, which were codified and systematized under Emperor Justinian I. His most significant contribution to the field of law was the Corpus Juris Civilis, or the body of civil law, which became the cornerstone of Byzantine legal practice and laid the groundwork for many of the legal systems in Europe and beyond. The Corpus Juris Civilis was a monumental effort to organize and consolidate centuries of Roman law, drawing on the vast wealth of legal thought from the Roman Republic and Empire. Justinian's ambition was to create a comprehensive and systematic body of law that could be applied uniformly across the Byzantine Empire, ensuring that justice was administered with consistency and fairness. This code was not merely a collection of legal statutes, but a reflection of the empire's values, emphasizing the importance of order, authority, and the protection of the people. The Corpus Juris Civilis consisted of several key texts, including the Codex Justinianus, the Digest, the Institutes, and the novels. The Codex was a compilation of existing laws, while the Digest offered a detailed commentary on the legal writings of past jurists. The Institute served as a manual for legal education, providing a simplified introduction to the law for students. The novels contained new laws introduced by Justinian himself, reflecting the ongoing evolution of legal thought during his reign. Together, these works created a legal framework that covered everything from civil law and property rights to family law, criminal justice, and public administration. Justinian's legal reforms were more than just academic or administrative. They had a profound impact on the lives of ordinary people throughout the empire. Byzantine law was deeply intertwined with the functioning of society. It governed personal relationships, defined property ownership, regulated commerce, and set penalties for crime. The code's comprehensive nature ensured that all aspects of life were subject to its jurisdiction, with the emperor serving as both the ultimate source of law and the supreme arbiter of justice. The influence of Byzantine law extended far beyond the fall of the empire itself. As the Byzantine Empire collapsed and the Ottoman Turks took control of much of its territory, Justinian's legal code remained a touchstone for legal thinkers in the Eastern Mediterranean. During the Middle Ages, parts of the Corpus Juris Civilis were rediscovered and studied in the West, particularly in Italy, where it became an essential source for the development of canon law and the civil law tradition. The principles embedded in Byzantine legal thought would later be absorbed into European legal systems, contributing to the development of modern legal codes, such as the Napoleonic Code in France, and the civil law systems in many European and Latin American countries. In this way, Byzantine law did not simply survive the fall of Constantinople it lived on, shaping the very foundations of legal thought and practice in the centuries to come. The Byzantine commitment to a structured, systematic approach to law laid the groundwork for the legal systems that govern much of the world today, proving the lasting legacy of the empire's legal innovations. The Byzantine Empire's influence on the arts and sciences was profound, extending far beyond its own borders and into the heart of the Middle Ages. Byzantine artisans, architects, and scholars made significant contributions to the development of both Eastern and Western cultural traditions, preserving and enhancing the legacy of the Roman Empire while simultaneously forging new paths in art, architecture, and intellectual thought. In the realm of architecture, the Byzantines developed a distinctive style that fused classical Roman elements with their own innovations. The most iconic example of Byzantine architecture is the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, which exemplified the empire's ingenuity. Completed in 537 under the direction of Emperor Justinian, the Hagia Sophia's massive dome and its complex structural design were unprecedented. It was a masterpiece of engineering, combining a vast interior with a sense of ethereal lightness, a key characteristic of Byzantine design. The use of pendentive triangular supports to hold up the dome was a breakthrough in architectural technique that allowed for the creation of larger, more open interior spaces. This architectural innovation would go on to influence the development of religious buildings in both the East and the West, including the Renaissance churches in Italy. In art, Byzantine painters, mosaicists, and iconographers perfected techniques that would define Christian art for centuries. The use of mosaics was one of the most striking features of Byzantine art, with large, intricate pieces covering the walls and ceilings of churches, palaces, and public buildings. These mosaics, made of glass, gold, and colored stones, depicted religious themes with vivid colors and a level of detail that was both spiritually symbolic and visually arresting. The Byzantine mosaicists achieved a sense of divine light and radiance, as seen in masterpieces like the mosaics in the Hagia Sophia and the Church of San Vitale in Ravenna. These works of art were not merely decorative, they were designed to inspire awe and convey the presence of the divine, drawing viewers into a spiritual experience. In addition to their contributions to visual arts and architecture, the Byzantines made significant strides in the sciences, particularly in medicine and philosophy. Byzantine scholars preserved and expanded upon the knowledge of ancient Greek and Roman thinkers, particularly in the fields of mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. Works of scholars like Galen and Hippocrates were studied and expanded upon in Byzantine medical schools, and the knowledge gained in these institutions was disseminated throughout the empire. Byzantine scientists were also instrumental in the preservation of ancient Greek texts, which later played a crucial role in the intellectual revival of the Renaissance. The Byzantines also contributed to the development of liturgical music and religious scholarship. The creation of the system of Gregorian chant and other forms of sacred music can be traced back to the theological and musical advancements made in the Byzantine Empire. The codification of religious texts and rituals by Byzantine scholars helped preserve Christian liturgical practices, providing a foundation for future theological development in the West. Overall, the Byzantine Empire's contributions to the arts and sciences were far-reaching, influencing the development of Western civilization. The preservation of classical knowledge, the architectural innovations, the vibrant visual arts, and the scientific advancements created a cultural legacy that continues to shape our world. Through their work, the Byzantines bridged the ancient and medieval worlds, preserving the knowledge of the past while forging new paths for the future. The social structure of the Byzantine Empire was highly complex, reflecting the blend of Roman traditions with Christian values. At the top of this hierarchy stood the emperor, considered the ultimate authority in both secular and religious matters. The emperor was not only a political leader, but also the divinely appointed representative of God on earth, embodying the sacred unity of the empire. His power was absolute, and he ruled with the assistance of a court that included advisors, generals, and a vast bureaucracy, all of whom played a vital role in maintaining the empire's intricate administration. Beneath the emperor, the highest social rank was occupied by the aristocracy, the powerful elite whose wealth and land holdings gave them significant influence over the workings of the state. This group consisted of nobles, military leaders, and wealthy landowners who held titles such as patrician or senator. These individuals enjoyed privileges, including exemptions from certain taxes, and often had direct access to the emperor, influencing political decisions and securing their wealth and status through connections within the court. The next layer of Byzantine society was made up of the urban middle class, including merchants, artisans, and skilled laborers. These individuals were crucial to the empire's economy, particularly in Constantinople, which was a thriving hub of trade and commerce. The middle class was also notable for its role in maintaining the cultural and intellectual life of the empire, with many members of this group receiving an education in the classics and Christian doctrine. Though they were not as wealthy or powerful as the aristocracy, the middle class played an essential role in the everyday functioning of Byzantine society. At the bottom of the social pyramid were the peasants, the backbone of the Byzantine economy. Most of the population lived in rural areas, working the land as agricultural laborers. The majority of these peasants were bound to the land they worked, paying taxes and providing services to the aristocrats who owned the estates. Though peasants were the most numerous group in the empire, their social mobility was extremely limited. They had little to no political power and were often subject to the harsh realities of rural life, including famine, war, and the ever-present demands of their landowners. In addition to this class system, Byzantine society was also shaped by the influence of the church. The clergy, particularly bishops and patriarchs, held considerable power, both spiritually and politically. The Patriarch of Constantinople, second only to the emperor in terms of religious authority, had significant sway over both church matters and public life. Monasticism also played a major role, as monks and nuns lived in religious communities that often became centers of learning, charity, and economic activity. Despite this rigid social structure, Byzantine society was not entirely impermeable. The Christian ideal of charity and compassion for the poor, as well as the potential for upward mobility through military service or education, allowed for some degree of fluidity. However, for most people, the rigid class system defined their lives, limiting their opportunities and determining their roles in both the empire and the church. The complex social hierarchy of the Byzantine Empire thus reflected a blend of Roman traditions, Christian values, and practical governance, ensuring that every segment of society had its place within the empire's intricate framework. The economy of the Byzantine Empire was multifaceted, combining elements of agriculture, trade, and industry, with Constantinople standing as the beating heart of commerce and economic activity. The empire's strategic position at the crossroads of Europe and Asia allowed it to flourish as a trade hub, drawing merchants from all corners of the known world. Its location on the Bosporus Strait, connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, gave the city a unique advantage, facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and culture between the East and West. Agriculture formed the foundation of the Byzantine economy, providing sustenance for the empire's vast population. The majority of people lived in rural areas, working the land as peasants who cultivated wheat, barley, olives, and grapes. These crops were vital to the empire's survival, and the production of olive oil and wine was particularly important, both for domestic consumption and for export. The fertility of the land, especially in regions like Anatolia and the Balkans, allowed the empire to maintain a steady agricultural output, which was crucial for feeding the people and sustaining the urban population in the cities. However, agriculture alone was not enough to support the empire's thriving economy. Trade played a critical role in connecting Byzantium to the wider world. Constantinople's harbours were always bustling with merchants and goods, and the empire's control over key trade routes allowed it to dominate commerce in the Mediterranean. The Byzantines traded in a variety of goods, including luxury items like silk, gold, and silver, as well as everyday products like grain, spices, and textiles. The famous Silk Road linked Byzantium to the east, allowing the empire to import precious fabrics and spices from India and China. In return, Byzantine goods, such as glassware, pottery, and metalwork, were sought after in markets as far away as Persia and Europe. Byzantine artisans, especially in Constantinople, produced high-quality goods, including textiles, jewelry, and religious icons, which were traded both domestically and abroad. The empire's skilled craftsmen were renowned for their ability to produce goods of extraordinary quality, and the imperial court often patronized artists, encouraging the production of elaborate works that were not only luxurious, but also served as symbols of the empire's wealth and divine favor. The Byzantine government also played an active role in the economy, regulating trade and commerce through a complex system of taxes, tariffs, and monopolies. The state controlled certain industries, such as silk production, where the import of silkworms and their cultivation was strictly regulated. The imperial treasury was dependent on taxes levied on land, trade, and industry, ensuring that the government had the resources to fund its military campaigns and public projects. Despite the wealth that flowed into the empire, the Byzantine economy was also shaped by social inequalities. The gap between the wealthy elite, who controlled much of the land and trade, and the peasants who worked the land was vast, with many people living in poverty. In the latter years of the empire, economic instability, compounded by warfare, internal corruption, and the rising influence of external powers like the Ottomans, contributed to a slow decline. Nonetheless, the Byzantine economy remained resilient for much of its existence, with Constantinople continuing to serve as a major commercial center even as the empire faced mounting challenges. Daily life in the Byzantine Empire was shaped by a rich blend of Roman traditions, Christian values, and Eastern influences, with society revolving around the emperor, the church, and the family unit. Constantinople, as the heart of the empire, showcased the heights of Byzantine culture, but the everyday experiences of its citizens, from the aristocracy to the common people, varied greatly depending on their social status. The majority of people in the empire lived in small towns or rural areas, working primarily as farmers or laborers. These peasants cultivated crops such as wheat, barley, and olives, while also tending to livestock. Their homes were simple, constructed from local materials like wood and stone, and typically consisted of small rooms arranged around a central courtyard. The living conditions were modest, with families often sharing their homes with animals, especially in the colder months. The smell of bread baking in simple ovens and the sound of daily chores were a constant presence in the lives of rural Byzantines. In contrast, life in the cities, particularly Constantinople, was more vibrant and bustling. The streets were crowded with merchants, artisans, and laborers, all contributing to the city's thriving economy. For the wealthy elite, life was marked by luxury and comfort. Their homes were spacious, with lavish decorations, courtyards, and gardens. Aristocratic women, often confined to their homes, were responsible for managing domestic affairs, overseeing servants, and ensuring that the household was well kept. Byzantine women were also known for their skill in embroidery, weaving, and other domestic crafts, which were highly valued. Food in the Byzantine Empire was a reflection of its diverse cultural influences. For the wealthy, meals were elaborate affairs featuring a variety of meats, fruits, vegetables, and imported spices. The aristocracy enjoyed fine wines, bread made from the finest grains, and exotic delicacies like game birds and fish from the Black Sea. The poor, however, ate more simply, relying on bread, porridge, and vegetables, with occasional meat or fish if they were fortunate. Olive oil, used in cooking and as a preservative, was a staple in Byzantine kitchens. Meals were often accompanied by wine, diluted with water, and served in communal settings where conversation and socializing were as important as the food itself. Public life in the Byzantine Empire was rich with entertainment, particularly in Constantinople. The Hippodrome, a large chariot racing stadium, was the center of much of the city's recreational activity. Spectators gathered there to watch thrilling races, often accompanied by cheers and chants from the crowds. The circus factions, such as the Blues and Greens, had a significant influence on Byzantine society, and their rivalries sometimes led to riots. The imperial court sponsored various forms of entertainment, including theatrical performances, musical concerts, and even gladiatorial combat, although the latter eventually declined in the Christian era. For many Byzantines, religion played an integral role in daily life. Church attendance was frequent, with people attending services on Sundays and during religious festivals. The Byzantine Empire was known for its deep Christian piety. and religious observances shaped the calendar and daily routines. Monasteries were vital centers of learning, religious devotion, and charity, with monks and nuns living a life of prayer and work. Iconography, or the creation of religious images, was an important aspect of Byzantine spirituality, with images of saints and Christ adorning churches and homes, acting as focal points for prayer and meditation. Thus, daily life in the Byzantine Empire was a complex tapestry of social customs, religious practices, and cultural expressions, reflecting the empire's grandeur and the challenges faced by its diverse population. From the vibrant markets of Constantinople to the humble homes of farmers, life in Byzantium was intricately tied to both the ancient traditions of Rome and the spiritual ideals of Christianity. The Byzantine military elite played a crucial role in the empire's defense, preserving its borders and upholding the authority of the emperor. From the fall of the Western Roman Empire to the end of Byzantium, the military structure evolved, integrating the legacies of Rome and adapting to the empire's changing needs. The core of this military was its professional soldiers, a trained and disciplined force distinct from the temporary militias of earlier periods. These elite units were integral not only in warfare, but in maintaining the stability of the Byzantine state. The Byzantine military was highly organized, with a clear hierarchical structure that included both officers and regular soldiers. At the top of the hierarchy stood the emperor, who was the supreme commander of the armed forces. Beneath him were the military leaders known as strategoi, regional commanders who were responsible for the defense of specific provinces. These strategoi oversaw the elite troops stationed throughout the empire, ensuring that local defense was not compromised by external threats. Below them were the various elite corps, each specializing in different forms of combat and stationed strategically across the empire. One of the most renowned elite units was the tagmata, the professional army that formed the backbone of Byzantine military power. The tagmata were stationed in Constantinople, and their soldiers were highly trained, well-equipped, and ready to respond quickly to any military threat. These units included both cavalry and infantry, and their strategic importance cannot be overstated. The Byzantine military elite also included the famous Varangian Guard, an elite group of mercenaries, most famously composed of Scandinavian warriors. Known for their loyalty and combat prowess, the Varangian Guard served as the personal bodyguards of the emperor, reflecting their importance in the Byzantine military system. Byzantine soldiers were not just warriors, but also craftsmen, and their military expertise extended to engineering and siege warfare. The Byzantines were famous for their innovative use of war machines, including trebuchets and Greek fire, a secret incendiary weapon that could be used on land or sea. The elite military units were not just reactive forces, they were offensive, engaging in campaigns to reclaim lost territories and defending the empire against invaders. However, these elite soldiers did not only defend physical borders, they were instrumental in maintaining the political integrity of the Byzantine state, often playing pivotal roles in internal struggles, including the many palace coups that marked the empire's history. The professionalization of the Byzantine military elite was central to the survival of the empire in an era of constant warfare. With a complex system of recruitment, training, and leadership, these soldiers were the backbone of Byzantine defense. They had a high level of commitment to their roles, backed by both military honor and material reward. The elite soldiers, well-funded and equipped, were the empire's greatest asset. Their loyalty to the emperor and the state was paramount, and their strength on the battlefield allowed the Byzantines to hold their ground against numerous foreign invaders. As the centuries passed, the role of the Byzantine military elite became more symbolic of the empire's power. Despite the challenges the empire faced, including invasions by the Arabs, Seljuks, and Ottomans, the legacy of the Byzantine military elite remained a critical part of the empire's identity. They were not just soldiers, they were defenders of a culture and a state that spanned centuries. representing the Byzantine Empire's resilience and martial prowess. Women in Byzantine society occupied complex and multifaceted roles, their status shaped by a combination of imperial law, religious doctrine, and social expectations. While they were often seen as subordinate to men in public life, women's influence was still evident in family dynamics, religious spheres, and occasionally, even in politics. The Byzantine Empire, inheriting much of Roman culture, maintained a patriarchal system, but the role of women was nonetheless significant in shaping its social fabric. In the family, women were primarily responsible for managing the household. They oversaw domestic duties such as caring for children, supervising servants, and ensuring the smooth functioning of daily life. Their role was crucial in maintaining the family's status and wealth, especially in a society where the family unit was a cornerstone of social stability. While education for women was not as widely accessible as it was for men, upper-class women had access to learning, often through their roles as wives or mothers of influential men. They were responsible for educating their children, especially in the aristocratic families where political alliances and intellectual inheritance were crucial. Byzantine law, largely based on the Roman legal system, was not particularly favorable to women. In legal terms, women were often seen as the property of their male guardians first, their fathers, and then their husbands. However, women's legal rights were not entirely absent. They had the ability to own property, and in some cases could inherit land, especially if there were no male heirs. The law also allowed women to divorce their husbands, though this was often subject to strict conditions. In this context, the role of women was primarily centered on their duties within the family, rather than having an independent public voice. Despite the restrictions placed on their lives, women could wield considerable influence in religious and political matters. In the religious realm, women played a central role in the Byzantine Church, most notably as nuns and in the role of empresses. The Virgin Mary was a central figure in Byzantine religious life, and her veneration elevated the status of women in the spiritual sphere. Empresses, particularly those of the ruling family, often played an active role in the political affairs of the empire. Some, like Theodora, the wife of Emperor Justinian I, became power brokers in their own right. Theodora's political acumen and involvement in the decision-making process during her husband's reign were remarkable, as she was instrumental in navigating crises, including the Nika riots. The prominence of women in religion and politics was not just limited to the upper classes. Women also had significant roles within monasteries, where they could exercise power, wealth, and influence. As abbesses, they managed large religious communities, held land, and were often called upon to mediate between rival political factions or offer counsel to the emperor. Monastic life gave women a certain level of independence and respect, albeit within the confines of religious structures. Though women's roles were largely shaped by traditional norms of marriage and motherhood, their influence within the Byzantine Empire, particularly in the realms of religion, family, and occasionally politics, was vital to the functioning and legacy of the empire. Their contributions to Byzantine society, though often understated, remain an essential aspect of its history. Eastern Orthodox Christianity developed uniquely within the Byzantine Empire, evolving alongside political, cultural, and social changes that shaped the region for centuries. With the establishment of Constantinople as the imperial capital, the Church's centralization began to mirror the empire's own, creating a strong connection between the state and the Christian faith. Over time, the relationship between the Church and the Byzantine emperors became one of mutual reinforcement, with the emperor acting as the protector of orthodoxy and the Church solidifying the emperor's divine right to rule. The early stages of this evolution were marked by theological and doctrinal debates that arose from the diverse Christian traditions across the empire. The establishment of the Nicene Creed in 325 AD, following the First Council of Nicaea, was pivotal in the creation of a unified Christian doctrine, asserting the divinity of Christ in opposition to Arianism. a heresy that denied Christ's full divinity. The Emperor Constantine played a key role in this religious unification, using his imperial authority to ensure the Church's doctrinal coherence. This act of state intervention in religious matters set a precedent for the Byzantine approach to Christianity, where the emperor not only served as a political leader, but as a protector of the faith. The theological debates that followed, including controversies over the nature of Christ and the Holy Trinity, shaped the structure of Eastern Orthodoxy. These disputes culminated in the formation of the Eastern Orthodox Church, which emphasized the importance of ecumenical councils gatherings of bishops and church leaders to settle doctrinal issues. Unlike the Roman Catholic Church, which eventually grew more centralized under the Pope, Eastern Orthodoxy remained decentralized, with a strong emphasis on the autonomy of local churches. The Patriarch of Constantinople, the highest ecclesiastical figure in the Byzantine Empire, was seen as the spiritual leader but not a supreme authority over the entire church. The iconoclastic controversies of the 8th and 9th centuries were another critical moment in the development of Eastern Orthodox Christianity. The debate over the veneration of icons divided the empire, with some emperors advocating for the destruction of religious images, while others defended their use as essential tools for spiritual life. This dispute highlighted the tension between imperial power and religious practice, as the Church sought to assert its authority over theological matters, while emperors attempted to maintain control over the empire's religious landscape. In the end, the Orthodox Church affirmed the use of icons, marking a decisive victory for religious tradition over imperial interference. As the Byzantine Empire weakened, the influence of Eastern Orthodox Christianity spread beyond the empire's borders. The missionary work of figures like Saint Cyril and Saint Methodius helped spread Orthodox Christianity to the Slavic peoples, who embraced the faith and established their own versions of the Church, further solidifying the Eastern Orthodox tradition in the broader Christian world. Despite the fall of Constantinople in 1453, Eastern Orthodoxy continued to thrive in the Byzantine legacy, its influence extending throughout Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. The development of Eastern Orthodox Christianity, deeply intertwined with the political, social, and cultural history of the Byzantine Empire, left an enduring mark on the Christian world, shaping the religious landscape for generations to come. The Great Schism, which formally occurred in 1054, was a momentous event in Christian history that divided the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church, creating a rift that would profoundly affect the religious landscape for centuries. This division was the culmination of decades of tension, political rivalry, and theological disagreements between the Latin-speaking West and the Greek-speaking East. While the immediate cause of the split was the mutual excommunications between the Patriarch of Constantinople and the Pope, the roots of the division stretched deep into the fabric of Byzantine society and its relationship with the broader Christian world. The growing differences between the Eastern and Western branches of Christianity were shaped by several factors, including cultural and linguistic divergence. In the Byzantine East, Greek was the dominant language, and the liturgy, theological writings, and ecclesiastical administration reflected this. The Western Church, by contrast, used Latin, which gradually became a barrier to communication and understanding between the two branches. These linguistic differences were compounded by the varying traditions in liturgical practices, such as the use of leavened versus unleavened bread for the Eucharist, and by disagreements over the interpretation of certain key theological concepts, notably the nature of the Holy Trinity and the role of the Pope. Another significant issue was the authority of the Pope. The papacy in Rome had steadily grown in power, claiming supremacy over all Christian churches. The Eastern Church, centered in Constantinople, rejected this notion, adhering to a more conciliar model of governance, where the Patriarch of Constantinople held significant influence but was not considered supreme. This led to increasing tensions, especially as the Western Church expanded its influence in the West and sought to assert its authority over the East. The political landscape further fueled the schism. As the Byzantine Empire faced external threats and internal challenges, the Eastern Church often found itself at odds with the political ambitions of the papacy. The West, meanwhile, saw itself as the protector of Christendom, often clashing with the Byzantine Empire over issues of jurisdiction and governance in regions like Sicily, the Balkans, and Italy. These political struggles, combined with the religious differences, deepened the divide. The formal excommunication of Patriarch Michael I Cerularius of Constantinople and Pope Leo IX in 1054, which occurred after a series of diplomatic failures, marked the point of no return. Each side accused the other of heresy, and the mutual excommunications symbolized the irrevocable break between the two branches of Christianity. The Great Schism was not merely a theological dispute, but also a reflection of the broader geopolitical and cultural rifts between the East and West. While the schism's immediate effects were felt most acutely in the Christian world, its lasting consequences reverberated throughout the Byzantine Empire. The divide weakened the cohesion of Christendom, making it harder for the eastern and western halves of the Church to cooperate against common threats, such as the rise of Islam and the later invasions of the Crusaders. In the centuries that followed, the rift between the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches would persist, leaving a legacy of division that continues to shape Christian relations to this day. Monasticism played a pivotal role in the religious and cultural fabric of the Byzantine Empire, serving as both a spiritual refuge and a cornerstone for preserving Christian tradition. The rise of monastic life in Byzantium can be traced back to the early centuries of Christianity, but it truly flourished in the Byzantine context, particularly after the reign of Emperor Constantine. Monasteries became more than places of prayer and contemplation. They evolved into influential centers of learning, charity, and governance, deeply interwoven with the empire's spiritual and intellectual life. The first Byzantine monasteries were established by ascetics who sought to withdraw from the distractions of the world in order to live a life devoted to God. These early monks and nuns embraced the ideals of poverty, chastity, and obedience, following in the footsteps of figures like Saint Anthony the Great, whose monastic community in Egypt inspired many across the empire. Monasticism was not merely an individual spiritual pursuit, but a communal way of life centered around the daily rhythm of prayer, work, and study. The rule of St. Benedict, which spread across the Byzantine world, became a key framework for organizing monastic communities, emphasizing the importance of discipline, prayer, and labor. Monasteries in the Byzantine Empire often played a central role in preserving and transmitting Christian tradition. They were hubs of theological study and manuscript production, where monks meticulously copied and preserved sacred texts, including the Bible, liturgical works, and the writings of the Church Fathers. During times of political instability and invasion, monasteries became sanctuaries that safeguarded invaluable cultural and religious knowledge. As the empire faced threats from both internal rebellion and external enemies, these religious communities ensured that Christian teachings, both doctrinal and cultural, were passed on to future generations. Beyond their spiritual contributions, Byzantine monasteries also played an important role in the social and economic life of the empire. Many monasteries were wealthy institutions, with large landholdings and extensive resources. They often provided charity, feeding and housing the poor, offering medical care, and caring for orphans and widows. The monks themselves were frequently involved in agricultural work, producing food, wine, and other goods that helped support their communities. Some monasteries even became powerful political players, with abbots and monks influencing imperial decisions and maintaining close ties with the ruling class. In addition to their charitable and economic activities, monasteries were centers of religious pilgrimage. Many of the most revered monasteries housed relics of saints and martyrs, attracting thousands of pilgrims who sought blessings or healing. The monastery's architectural beauty, with their intricate mosaics, frescoes, and sacred icons, also became symbols of Byzantine artistic and religious achievements. Through their dedication to preserving religious life and promoting spiritual devotion, monasteries shaped the Byzantine Empire's Christian identity. Despite facing external pressures and internal reforms, Byzantine monasticism remained a central part of the empire's religious and cultural identity throughout its history. The monastic movement's influence continued long after the fall of Constantinople, leaving a lasting legacy on the Orthodox Church and Christian communities around the world. Monasteries were not only places of spiritual retreat, but also the heart of Byzantine Christian civilization, ensuring the survival of its faith, culture, and traditions for centuries. The theological struggles of Byzantium were fundamental to its identity, shaping not only the religious life of the empire, but also its political and cultural frameworks. From its early Christian roots, the Byzantine Empire was marked by a series of intense theological debates and controversies, many of which had profound and lasting effects on the development of Christian doctrine and the relationship between church and state. One of the most significant theological challenges faced by the Byzantine Empire was the Christological controversy, which centered around the nature of Christ. The question of whether Christ was fully divine, fully human, or a combination of both was the subject of fierce debate. This issue came to a head in the early ecumenical councils, the most famous of which was the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, convened by Emperor Constantine. The Nicene Creed, which emerged from this council, established the doctrine that Christ was consubstantial with the Father, affirming the full divinity of Jesus Christ. However, this decision did not end the debate. Various heresies continued to challenge the Nicene understanding, particularly Arianism, which argued that Christ was a created being and not truly divine. The struggle between Nicene orthodoxy and Arianism created deep divisions within the empire, leading to political instability and religious turmoil. The controversy over the nature of Christ did not end with the Nicene Creed. In the 5th century, the rise of monophysitism, a belief that Christ had only one, divine nature, further divided the empire. This was opposed by the Chalcedonian definition of 451, which stated that Christ existed in two natures, one divine and one human, without confusion, change, division, or separation. Despite this, the monophysite controversy remained a source of tension, particularly in Egypt and Syria, where large populations rejected the Chalcedonian Creed. These theological debates often intertwined with political and ethnic identities, as local church leaders sought to assert their own interpretations of doctrine, leading to the formation of factions within the empire. Another major theological struggle involved the role of icons in worship. The Byzantine Empire's use of religious images, or icons, became a contentious issue during the period of iconoclasm in the 8th and 9th centuries. Emperor Leo III, motivated by a mix of religious, political, and military concerns, initiated the first phase of iconoclasm in 726, ordering the destruction of icons. This policy was supported by a faction of bishops and theologians who argued that the veneration of images was idolatrous and contrary to the teachings of the Church. However, the destruction of icons was opposed by many clergy and laypeople, including Empress Irene, who eventually restored the veneration of icons in 787 with the Second Council of Nicaea. Despite this victory for the pro-icon faction, the theological and political consequences of iconoclasm continued to affect the empire for years, as the controversy left deep divisions within the church and society. These theological disputes were not just abstract doctrinal issues, they were intimately tied to the empire's power structure. Emperors often took sides in these debates, using their authority to shape the religious landscape of the empire. The church and the state were intricately linked, with the emperor seen as a protector of orthodoxy and an arbiter of theological disputes. This close relationship between the church and state meant that theological controversies often had far-reaching political implications, influencing everything from imperial policy to military campaigns. The theological struggles of Byzantium were integral to the development of Eastern Orthodox Christianity and the shaping of Byzantine identity. These debates not only defined Christian doctrine, but also demonstrated the complexity of the relationship between faith, politics, and culture in the Byzantine Empire. They helped to shape the religious traditions that continue to influence the Eastern Orthodox Church and the broader Christian world today. The iconoclast controversy stands as one of the most significant and contentious episodes in Byzantine history, leaving a lasting impact on both religious and cultural practices in the empire. This period, spanning the 8th and 9th centuries, was marked by fierce theological debates and intense political struggles that reshaped the Byzantine church and society. At the heart of the controversy was the question of the veneration of icons, religious images used in the worship of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and the saints. The controversy began in 726, when Emperor Leo III initiated the first phase of iconoclasm. He argued that the veneration of icons was tantamount to idolatry and sought to eliminate their use within the empire. His decree to destroy icons was influenced by both religious convictions and political motives. Leo's religious views were partly shaped by his desire to align with the teachings of the Old Testament, which forbade the worship of graven images. Additionally, the emperor may have hoped to unite the diverse religious factions within his empire, which included both Christian and non-Christian communities, by limiting religious practices that could be seen as divisive or excessive. Opposition to the iconoclast movement was swift and widespread, particularly among the clergy and the monastic communities, who viewed the icons as an essential part of Christian worship. For them, the icons were not objects of worship in themselves, but were seen as windows to the divine, helping to bring the faithful closer to God. The veneration of icons had deep roots in Byzantine religious practice, and many believed that these sacred images had the power to heal, protect, and offer divine blessings. The destruction of icons, therefore, was perceived as an attack on the very essence of Byzantine Christianity. The controversy deepened over the next several decades, as emperors took different positions on the issue. After Leo III's death, his son, Constantine V, continued his father's iconoclastic policies, using imperial authority to enforce the destruction of icons and punish those who defied the imperial edict. The emperors who followed were often embroiled in this theological struggle, and the empire was divided over the issue. The church, too, was split between those who supported the emperor's stance and those who defended the use of icons. In 787, Empress Irene restored the veneration of icons with the Second Council of Nicaea, which declared that the use of icons was in accordance with Christian tradition. This council marked a temporary victory for the iconophiles, those who supported the veneration of images. However, the iconoclastic debates did not end there. A few decades later, Emperor Leo V revived the iconoclastic policies, reigniting the conflict. The struggle reached its peak in the early 9th century, but in 843, the Empress Theodora, with the support of the Church, finally brought an end to iconoclasm and restored the veneration of icons once and for all. The iconoclast controversy had profound consequences for the Byzantine Empire. It not only caused deep divisions within the Church, but also had lasting cultural impacts. The destruction of icons during the periods of iconoclasm led to the loss of countless works of art, many of which had been important to the religious and artistic heritage of the empire. It also prompted a re-evaluation of religious practices and the role of the emperor in religious matters. Ultimately, the controversy reshaped the relationship between church and state, reinforcing the power of the church in defining religious orthodoxy, while also highlighting the tension between imperial authority and religious tradition. Byzantine diplomacy was a crucial component of the empire's survival. Strength, especially given the empire's location at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. The Byzantines understood the importance of managing relationships with their neighbors, often relying on a combination of military power, strategic marriages, and diplomatic skill to maintain peace and influence in the region. Throughout its long history, Byzantium's foreign relations were shaped by two main challenges: dealing with the expanding Islamic world to the east and maintaining its relationships with the Latin West. The rise of Islam in the 7th century posed an immediate threat to the Byzantine Empire. The Muslim conquests rapidly expanded across the eastern Mediterranean, bringing vast territories under Islamic rule and threatening Byzantine control over vital regions like Syria, Egypt, and North Africa. Faced with this new power, the Byzantine Empire adopted a policy of cautious diplomacy while also engaging in military conflict. The Byzantines sought to create alliances with local rulers and tribes to counter the Muslim advance, often offering tribute or forming temporary alliances to safeguard their interests. At the same time, they worked to maintain the loyalty of their Christian subjects within the newly conquered territories. The empire's strategy was one of containment, holding onto its core territories while trying to limit the spread of Islam through military engagements and diplomatic maneuvers. Byzantine diplomacy also had to contend with the complexities of Western Europe. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the Byzantines viewed themselves as the rightful heirs to the Roman legacy, and the imperial title was recognized as the ultimate authority in Christendom. However, the rise of powerful kingdoms in Western Europe, such as the Holy Roman Empire, often put the Byzantines in a delicate position. The relationship between Byzantium and the West was frequently marked by both cooperation and rivalry. During the Middle Ages, the Byzantines engaged in several diplomatic exchanges with the papacy and the rulers of the Holy Roman Empire. However, the tensions that culminated in the Great Schism of 1054 strained relations between the Byzantine Empire and the Latin West. This division further complicated Byzantine diplomacy, as the empire had to contend with both the papacy's influence and the rising power of Western European monarchies. At the same time, Byzantine diplomacy remained adept at using marriage as a political tool. Marriages between Byzantine emperors and foreign princesses were often strategically arranged to secure alliances with powerful neighbors. These unions helped strengthen the Byzantine position, particularly in times of military conflict or political instability. For example, the marriage of Empress Theodora to Emperor Justinian helped solidify his power, while the strategic alliances formed through marriage provided military and political leverage in negotiations. Byzantium's diplomatic strategies were also shaped by its wealth and commercial interests. Constantinople, located on the Bosporus, was the center of a vast network of trade routes connecting Europe with Asia. The empire used its economic power to maintain favorable relations with trading partners, offering protection in exchange for access to valuable resources and markets. Through trade agreements, Byzantium cultivated strong ties with regions ranging from Russia to North Africa, ensuring that its commercial interests were well protected. Byzantine diplomacy was an essential element of the empire's survival, especially during times of internal decline or external threat. The empire's ability to adapt its foreign policy and form strategic alliances, while also leveraging military and economic power, ensured that Byzantium remained a dominant force in the Mediterranean world for centuries. Despite the challenges it faced, Byzantine diplomacy's nuanced approach to foreign relations played a significant role in sustaining the empire throughout its turbulent history. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, but its cultural and intellectual legacy continued to influence Europe, particularly during the Renaissance. Despite the empire's decline, Byzantine scholars had preserved vast amounts of classical Greek and Roman knowledge, and their exodus to Italy, following the fall of Constantinople, played a pivotal role in shaping the intellectual revival of the Renaissance. Byzantine scholars had long been stewards of ancient texts, many of which had been lost to Western Europe during the Middle Ages. The Byzantines not only preserved the works of ancient Greek philosophers and historians, but also developed a deep understanding of classical art, science, and literature. Their preservation of Greek manuscripts, including the writings of Aristotle, Plato, and the medical texts of Galen, became crucial to the revival of classical learning in Europe. The knowledge they carried with them helped spark the intellectual movement that would become the Renaissance, a period of renewed interest in the classical world and humanism. The influx of Byzantine scholars into Italy following the Ottoman conquest of Constantinople brought with them not only ancient manuscripts, but also a wealth of knowledge in fields such as philosophy, theology, and the arts. These scholars were instrumental in translating Greek texts into Latin and Italian, making them accessible to a wider European audience. They played a key role in reintroducing the works of ancient philosophers, mathematicians, and scientists, which had been largely forgotten in Western Europe. This revival of classical knowledge laid the groundwork for the explosion of intellectual and artistic achievement that defined the Renaissance. Byzantine influence extended beyond the intellectual realm and into the realm of art and architecture. The Byzantine style, with its rich mosaics, intricate iconography, and use of gold, left a lasting impact on Renaissance artists. The use of perspective and realistic proportions, while a hallmark of Renaissance art, was influenced by the Byzantine tradition of creating spiritual and symbolic depth in religious images. Additionally, the Byzantine architectural style, with its distinctive domed churches, influenced the design of Renaissance buildings, most notably in the construction of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. The religious and philosophical ideals that had flourished in the Byzantine Empire also found their way into Renaissance thought. The Byzantine emphasis on the unity of the divine and the human, as expressed in its art and theology, resonated with the Renaissance humanists, who sought to reconcile the classical ideals of human dignity and achievement with Christian theology. The interaction between Byzantine and Renaissance scholars created a fusion of ancient wisdom and Christian thought, which deeply influenced the philosophical and theological discussions of the time. The Byzantine Empire may have fallen, but its contributions to Western culture and thought were far from diminished. Through its scholars, texts, and artistic traditions, Byzantium played a crucial role in shaping the intellectual and cultural landscape of the Renaissance. The empire's legacy lived on, not only in the preservation of classical knowledge, but also in the way it helped to reshape Europe's intellectual and artistic heritage, bridging the ancient and the modern worlds. The Byzantine Empire played a central role in the spread of Christianity and culture to the Slavic world, particularly from the 9th to the 11th centuries. As the dominant Christian power in the East, Byzantium's influence extended far beyond its borders, reaching the Slavic peoples in the Balkans and beyond. This interaction had profound effects on the religious, cultural, and political development of the Slavic nations, shaping their history for centuries. The process of Christianization began with the missionary efforts of Byzantine monks, most notably Saints Cyril and Methodius, who are revered as the apostles to the Slavs. In the 860s, Cyril and Methodius, both of whom were educated in the Byzantine tradition, were sent to the region of Great Moravia, an early Slavic kingdom located in Central Europe. The two brothers sought to convert the Slavs to Christianity, but their mission was complicated by the fact that the Slavic peoples had no written language. To overcome this obstacle, Cyril invented the Glagolitic alphabet, the first written script for the Slavic languages, which allowed the Slavs to read the Bible and liturgical texts in their own tongue. Their mission was a success, and the spread of Christianity began to take root in the Slavic world. The adoption of Christianity brought not only religious transformation, but also a cultural renaissance, as the Slavic peoples began to embrace Byzantine artistic, architectural, and intellectual traditions. Byzantine religious practices, including the use of icons, liturgies, and church design, became integral to Slavic culture. The church played a central role in the lives of the Slavic peoples, fostering a sense of unity and identity as the region's rulers adopted Christianity as a state religion. Byzantine influence was also felt in the creation of early Slavic states. As the Byzantine Empire expanded its influence in the Balkans, it formed alliances with Slavic rulers and provided them with the political and religious legitimacy that came with being associated with the Eastern Orthodox Church. The rulers of the first Slavic kingdoms, such as the Bulgars and the Kievan Rus, adopted Byzantine customs and institutions, establishing monarchies with close ties to Constantinople. These connections not only secured political power for these rulers, but also solidified the spread of Orthodox Christianity throughout the Slavic world. Through the Byzantine Empire, the Slavic nations were introduced to the concept of imperial rule and governance. Byzantine administrative systems and legal codes, most notably Justinian's Code, influenced the legal and political structures of Slavic kingdoms. Byzantine art and architecture left an indelible mark on Slavic culture, with churches and monasteries built in the distinctive Byzantine style. These influences helped to shape the distinct cultural identity of the Slavic world, one rooted in Eastern Orthodox Christianity and Byzantine traditions. The Byzantine Empire's legacy in the Slavic world endured long after its fall, and its impact on the religious and cultural landscape of the Slavic nations remains evident today. The spread of Christianity and Byzantine culture helped to forge a lasting bond between Byzantium and the Slavic peoples, laying the foundation for a shared spiritual and cultural heritage that continues to shape the region. Byzantium's involvement in the Crusades was marked by a complex relationship with the Western powers, characterized by both cooperation and conflict. The Crusades, initiated in the late 11th century as a series of religious wars by the Latin Christian West to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim rule, had significant implications for the Byzantine Empire. Situated at the crossroads of East and West, Byzantium found itself in a delicate position, balancing its own strategic interests with the demands and ambitions of the Crusaders. The First Crusade, called by Pope Urban II in 1095, was intended to help the Byzantine Empire, which had been struggling to repel Seljuk Turkish invasions in Asia Minor. The Byzantine Emperor, Alexios I Komnenos, sought assistance from the West to stem the tide of Muslim expansion. In exchange for military aid, Alexios offered the Crusaders supplies, access to Byzantine territory, and the promise of support for their campaign in the Holy Land. The Crusaders, in turn, viewed their mission as a holy endeavor, one that was meant to reclaim Christian lands and defend Christendom from Muslim aggression. The cooperation, however, was fraught with tension. The Crusaders, eager to assert their independence and pursue their own agenda, often disregarded Byzantine authority. As they made their way through Byzantine lands, they pillaged and ravaged towns and cities, creating a rift between the Crusaders and the Byzantines. Despite these tensions, the Crusades succeeded in capturing Jerusalem in 1099, but the Western powers failed to honor their agreements with Byzantium. Instead of returning captured territories to the Byzantine Empire, the Crusaders established their own Latin kingdom of Jerusalem, further complicating relations between East and West. In the following decades, Byzantine relations with the Crusaders deteriorated further. The Fourth Crusade, launched in 1202, was particularly disastrous for Byzantium. Initially intended to conquer Muslim-controlled Egypt, the Crusaders, led by Venetian forces, diverted their attention to Constantinople. In 1204, the Crusaders sacked the city, looting its treasures and causing immense destruction. This event marked one of the darkest chapters in Byzantine history, as it led to the temporary collapse of the Byzantine Empire and the establishment of the Latin Empire of Constantinople. The sack of Constantinople had lasting consequences. Not only did it weaken the Byzantine Empire, but it also deepened the animosity between the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches. The Crusaders, acting under the banner of the Catholic Church, had not only attacked a Christian city, but also desecrated sacred Orthodox sites, exacerbating the religious divide that would persist for centuries. Despite the turmoil caused by the Crusades, Byzantium's influence on the Western powers remained significant. The Byzantine Empire served as a critical buffer against Islamic expansion, and its intellectual, cultural, and artistic contributions played a key role in the Renaissance that followed the Crusades. In many ways, the Crusades served to bring Byzantium and the West into closer, albeit strained, contact, setting the stage for the eventual cultural exchange that would shape the future of Europe. The Byzantine Empire's legacy in Eastern Europe is both profound and enduring, shaping the cultural, religious, and political landscapes of the region for centuries. While the empire itself came to an end in 1453, its influence continued to reverberate, particularly through the spread of Eastern Orthodox Christianity and Byzantine cultural practices. This enduring legacy helped to define the development of Eastern European nations, including Russia, Greece, and the Balkans. One of the most significant contributions of Byzantium to Eastern Europe was the spread of Orthodox Christianity. The Byzantines had long been instrumental in spreading Christianity throughout the region, beginning with the missionary work of Saints Cyril and Methodius in the 9th century. These two brothers, both Byzantine scholars, developed the Glagolitic alphabet, which evolved into the Cyrillic script still used in Russia, Serbia, and other Slavic nations today. Their efforts to translate the Bible and liturgical texts into Slavic languages made Christianity more accessible to the people of the Balkans and Russia, fostering a deep and lasting connection between the Eastern Orthodox Church and these nations. The establishment of the Russian Orthodox Church in particular helped to solidify the ties between the Russian state and the Byzantine religious tradition. Byzantium's political influence also left its mark on Eastern Europe. The Byzantine Empire's system of governance, with its emphasis on centralized rule and the close relationship between church and state, was admired and emulated by many Eastern European rulers. The Byzantine model of imperial authority and the notion of the emperor as God's representative on earth provided a framework for later rulers in the region. Russia, in particular, adopted this model following the fall of Constantinople, with the notion of Moscow as the Third Rome gaining prominence. The idea that the Russian Tsar was the heir to the Byzantine legacy became a powerful symbol of political authority in Russia for centuries. Culturally, the impact of Byzantine art, architecture, and education was deeply felt in Eastern Europe. Byzantine mosaics, icons, and religious architecture influenced the development of Eastern Orthodox churches throughout the region. The use of domed architecture, the decoration of churches with vibrant mosaics, and the creation of elaborate religious icons were all practices that were passed down from Byzantium to its neighbors. In Russia, for example, the iconic onion domes of Russian Orthodox churches are a direct descendant of Byzantine architectural styles. The Byzantine influence on Eastern European education also cannot be overstated. The preservation and transmission of ancient Greek and Roman knowledge, particularly in philosophy, medicine, and law, had a lasting effect on the intellectual development of Eastern Europe. Byzantine scholars played a key role in preserving classical texts, and many of these works were later transmitted to Western Europe, where they helped spark the Renaissance. In Russia and other Eastern European nations, the Byzantine tradition of scholarly learning contributed to the development of schools and universities, fostering a rich intellectual culture that would continue to flourish. Though the Byzantine Empire fell in 1453, its lasting impact on Eastern Europe remained an integral part of the region's identity. The cultural, religious, and political legacies of Byzantium helped shape the course of Eastern European history, with Russia and Greece, in particular, continuing to carry the torch of Byzantine civilization long after the empire's demise. The fall of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of the Ottoman Empire marked a profound shift in the power dynamics of the Eastern Mediterranean and beyond. As the once mighty Byzantine Empire weakened over centuries of decline, the Ottomans emerged as the dominant power in the region, ultimately taking control of Constantinople in 1453 and establishing themselves as the preeminent force in southeastern Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. The Byzantine Empire, which had been struggling with internal strife, economic hardship, and external threats, was already in decline by the time the Ottoman Empire began its ascent. The Ottomans, originally a small Turkish principality, capitalized on the fragmented state of the Byzantine Empire and the growing power of their own military forces. The Ottoman expansion began in the late 13th century under the leadership of Osman I, and by the mid-15th century, the Ottomans had laid siege to Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire. The city, once a symbol of Byzantine strength and resilience, was unable to withstand the Ottoman assault. The conquest of Constantinople by Sultan Mehmed II in 1453 marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and the beginning of the Ottoman Empire's reign over the region. The fall of Constantinople had devastating consequences for the Byzantine people and their culture, but it also signaled the transformation of the Eastern Mediterranean. The Ottomans swiftly absorbed much of the Byzantine territory, and Constantinople itself was transformed into the Ottoman capital, Istanbul. The city's rich architectural, cultural, and religious legacy, including the Hagia Sophia, became part of the Ottomans' heritage, but it also symbolized the changing political and religious landscape of the region. With the fall of Byzantium, the Ottomans became the heirs to the Byzantine Empire's political and cultural legacy. While the Ottomans were distinct in their religious and cultural identity, drawing upon their Islamic traditions, they also inherited much from the Byzantines, particularly in terms of governance, law, and military structure. The Ottoman Empire adopted the Byzantine system of centralized administration, which allowed the sultans to maintain control over a vast and diverse empire. Additionally, the Ottomans continued many Byzantine traditions in art, architecture, and learning, blending them with their own influences to create a unique Ottoman culture. The rise of the Ottomans also marked a shift in religious dynamics. The Ottoman Empire, with its strong Islamic identity, rapidly expanded into territories that had once been under Christian Byzantine control. The fall of Constantinople signaled the end of Eastern Orthodox Christianity's dominance in the region, though the Ottomans allowed the Orthodox Christian community to continue practicing their faith under a millet system, which granted them a degree of autonomy within the empire. As the Ottoman Empire grew, it would go on to challenge European powers, dominate the Eastern Mediterranean, and influence the course of world history for centuries to come. The rise of the Ottomans and the fall of Byzantium reshaped the geopolitical and cultural landscape of the Middle East and Europe, marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. The Byzantine Empire, though enduring for over 1,000 years, was often regarded with a mixture of admiration, disdain, and misunderstanding by Western powers. Its long reign, which began as the Eastern Roman Empire and continued as a bastion of Christian civilization, was frequently seen through the lens of Western Europe's evolving political, religious, and cultural narratives. For many in the West, Byzantium represented both a continuation of Roman grandeur and a relic of a fading, archaic world, struggling to hold on as new powers, like the emerging European monarchies and the Islamic caliphates, rose to prominence. To medieval and Renaissance Europeans, the Byzantine Empire was a paradox. On one hand, it was revered as the rightful heir to the Roman Empire, the guardian of ancient Roman law, philosophy, and classical culture. Byzantine scholars preserved Greek and Roman knowledge, transmitting it to the West, particularly through the works of Aristotle and Plato, which would later fuel the Renaissance. The art, architecture, and religious practices of Byzantium were seen as symbols of its grandeur, especially the majestic Hagia Sophia and its intricate mosaics, which portrayed a divine and eternal order. However, Byzantium's later years were often viewed less favorably by the West. The religious schism between the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches in 1054, which resulted in the Great Schism, left a deep rift in Western perceptions of the Byzantine Empire. While Byzantium was viewed as the seat of Eastern Christianity, its religious practices, iconography, and theology were often seen as foreign or heretical by Western European powers, particularly as the Catholic Church solidified its influence across much of Europe. This divide further compounded the West's view of Byzantium as an empire in decline, trapped in a struggle with the Seljuk Turks and later the Ottoman Empire. The Fourth Crusade in 1204, when Western Crusaders sacked Constantinople and divided the city's wealth, deepened Western animosity. What was supposed to be a campaign to reclaim Jerusalem from Muslim control turned into a looting of the Christian Byzantine heartland. The subsequent establishment of the Latin Empire in Constantinople only further alienated the Byzantine Empire from the West. While Western Europe was growing in political and economic power, Byzantium was increasingly marginalized, its empire reduced to a shadow of its former glory. By the time of the Ottoman conquest in 1453, the Western view of Byzantium was one of inevitable collapse, a once great empire unable to stand against the rise of Islamic and Western European powers. Yet, even in its final days, the fall of Constantinople captured the imagination of Western Europe. For many, it was a tragic event, symbol of the fading of the old world and the dawn of the new. Byzantium's demise was woven into the West's broader historical narrative, often portrayed as a moment of both loss and transformation, a bridge between the ancient world and the rise of modern Europe. Thus, while Byzantium was admired for its preservation of knowledge and its role in defending Christendom, it was often viewed as an empire doomed by its isolation, internal divisions, and the overwhelming external threats. The myth of Byzantium in the West is one of both reverence and neglect, an empire that shaped Western history, yet was often overlooked or misunderstood in its own time. The rediscovery of Byzantine art and architecture in modern times has been a remarkable journey, one that has revealed the depth of creativity, spirituality, and technical mastery that defined the Byzantine Empire. For centuries, the rich cultural heritage of Byzantium was largely forgotten or overlooked by the Western world, overshadowed by the dominance of classical Greco-Roman art and the Renaissance. However, with the passage of time, scholars, artists, and historians began to recognize the profound influence of Byzantine culture on the development of European art and architecture. The initial wave of rediscovery came during the 19th century, a period marked by a growing fascination with ancient civilizations and a renewed interest in the history of Christianity. As the Ottoman Empire, which had inherited much of Byzantine territory, began to decline, scholars and travelers in the region began to explore the remnants of Byzantine art, particularly in the former Byzantine capital of Constantinople, now Istanbul. The discovery of Byzantine churches, mosaics, and other religious artifacts ignited a new appreciation for the empire's artistic achievements. One of the most significant moments in this revival was the growing recognition of the importance of Byzantine mosaics. These intricate works, which adorned the walls of churches and palaces, were seen as masterpieces of religious expression, blending vibrant colors and spiritual iconography in ways that had not been fully appreciated before. The mosaics of Hagia Sophia, for example, began to be regarded as icons of Byzantine artistic innovation, capturing the divine with an intensity that transcended simple decoration. The use of gold leaf and glass tesserae, the precision of their designs, and the depth of their spiritual meaning became central to modern understandings of Byzantine artistry. In architecture, the rediscovery of Byzantine influence was particularly profound. The dome, a hallmark of Byzantine design, came to be seen as a symbol of the empire's architectural ingenuity. The Hagia Sophia, with its soaring dome and the innovative use of pendentives to support it, became a model for architects across the world. The revival of interest in this structure and its architectural innovations inspired a resurgence of domed architecture in both religious and secular buildings, notably during the Renaissance and later in Baroque and neoclassical styles. In the 20th century, the study of Byzantine art expanded to include its role in the development of Christian iconography. Scholars began to trace the evolution of religious imagery in Byzantine culture, noting how it shaped the depiction of saints, Christ, and the Virgin Mary in Eastern Orthodoxy. The iconic style of Byzantine painting, characterized by its use of gold backgrounds, elongated figures, and spiritual focus, influenced the art of Orthodox Christianity for centuries. This revival also contributed to a broader understanding of the Byzantine Empire as a crucial link between the ancient world and the Middle Ages, preserving and transmitting cultural and religious knowledge. The rediscovery of Byzantine art and architecture has thus been more than just an academic pursuit. It has sparked a deep appreciation for a civilization that, despite its fall, continues to resonate in modern culture. From the revival of Byzantine aesthetics in contemporary art to the preservation of its architectural legacy in museums and religious sites, the Byzantine Empire's artistic contributions have found a lasting place in the modern world. Through this renewed interest, the Byzantine Empire has been reborn not only as a historical subject, but as an enduring source of inspiration for creativity, faith, and design. The enduring legacy of Byzantium is evident in many aspects of modern Eastern Orthodox Christianity and culture, a testament to the empire's profound influence on the course of history. Though the Byzantine Empire fell in 1453, its traditions, values, and practices did not vanish. Instead, they were preserved, adapted, and continue to shape the cultural, spiritual, and intellectual landscape of Eastern Europe and the broader Orthodox world. In Eastern Orthodox Christianity, the theological and liturgical practices established in Byzantium remain central to the faith. The Byzantine liturgy, with its rich hymns, intricate rituals, and iconography, is still the foundation of worship in Orthodox churches today. The Divine Liturgy, which evolved over centuries in the Byzantine Empire, is celebrated across Orthodox communities with the same reverence and structure that defined it during the empire's height. The use of ancient Greek texts, the chanting of hymns, and the reverence for sacred iconsal hallmarks of Byzantine Christian worship continue to inspire deep devotion in millions of believers. The importance of icons, which became so integral to the religious life of Byzantium, remains especially strong. Icons in Eastern Orthodox Christianity are not merely works of art, they are seen as windows to the divine, serving as an essential part of worship and personal devotion. The style of Byzantine iconography, with its emphasis on the spiritual over the material, is faithfully preserved and practiced in Orthodox religious centers today. These icons, often depicting Christ, the Virgin Mary, and saints, are integral to the identity and faith of Orthodox communities, connecting them to the Byzantine past and the unbroken tradition of sacred art. Byzantium's legacy is also felt in the continued importance of monasticism in Orthodox Christianity. The monastic tradition, which flourished during the Byzantine era, remains a cornerstone of spiritual life in Orthodox countries. Monasteries continue to play a crucial role in the preservation of Christian traditions, including the practice of asceticism, the study of scripture, and the preservation of liturgical music. The monastic communities of Mount Athos in Greece, one of the most revered spiritual centers in the Orthodox world, continue to uphold the ancient practices and ideals of Byzantine monasticism. In terms of cultural and intellectual contributions, the Byzantine Empire helped shape the development of the Renaissance through its preservation and transmission of classical Greek and Roman knowledge. Byzantine scholars played a key role in preserving ancient texts, which were later rediscovered by Renaissance scholars in Western Europe. This intellectual legacy is still felt today in the study of ancient philosophy, literature, and theology within Orthodox universities and theological schools, which continue to be places of learning and scholarship in the Orthodox world. Finally, the influence of Byzantium extends to the cultural identity of modern Eastern European nations, particularly Greece, Russia, and the Balkans. The cultural practices, artistic traditions, and social values that were nurtured under the Byzantine Empire continue to shape the national identities of these countries. The Byzantine influence is seen in everything from architecture and music to family structure and national consciousness, where the connection to the empire's glorious past is celebrated as a defining element of cultural heritage. In this way, the Byzantine Empire's legacy endures, not only in the religious practices and traditions of Eastern Orthodoxy, but also in the cultural and intellectual life of the modern Orthodox world. Its contributions continue to resonate through the ages, reminding us of an empire that, despite its fall, remains a powerful force in shaping the spiritual and cultural fabric of the present. The rise and fall of the Byzantine Empire represent one of the most remarkable and complex stories in the history of civilization. As the eastern continuation of the Roman Empire, Byzantium stood as a beacon of resilience, culture, and intellectual achievement for over a millennium. Its legacy stretches far beyond the fall of Constantinople in 1453, influencing modern religious practices, art, law, and governance in profound ways. The Byzantine Empire's rise, characterized by the strategic brilliance of emperors like Constantine and Justinian, laid the foundation for a uniquely Christian and imperial vision that would shape the trajectory of Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean world for centuries. From the outset, the Byzantine Empire stood as a synthesis of Roman governance and Christian spirituality. The reign of Emperor Constantine marked a pivotal turning point, as he not only consolidated power but also embraced Christianity, giving it a status that would define Byzantine civilization for the ages. Under his successors, Byzantium became the custodian of Roman law, arts, and culture, while at the same time forging a new identity in the Christian faith. The monumental achievements of the Byzantine Empire, such as the codification of Roman law under Justinian, the awe-inspiring Hagia Sophia, and the preservation of classical Greek and Roman knowledge, cemented its place in the annals of history as a center of both spiritual and intellectual life. The empire's influence extended well beyond its borders, especially through the Eastern Orthodox Church, which emerged as one of the defining features of Byzantine civilization. The theological debates, liturgical practices, and artistic achievements of the empire left an indelible mark on the Orthodox Christian world, shaping not only the religious practices of its time, but also the spiritual outlook of countless generations that followed. Byzantine art, particularly its iconic mosaics and sacred icons, continues to resonate in the religious traditions of the Orthodox Church. Yet, despite its cultural and religious triumphs, the Byzantine Empire faced numerous challenges that ultimately led to its fall. Internal divisions, military overextension, and the rise of powerful adversaries like the Seljuk Turks and the Ottoman Empire chipped away at the empire's once imposing strength. The sack of Constantinople during the Fourth Crusade, coupled with the empire's later decline under the Palaiologos dynasty, left Byzantium vulnerable to the Ottoman advance. The fall of Constantinople in 1453, though a tragic end for the Byzantine Empire, marked the beginning of a new era in the Mediterranean and the Balkans, one shaped by the Ottomans but also deeply influenced by the Byzantine legacy. In reflecting on the rise and fall of the Byzantine Empire, it is impossible to ignore its enduring significance. It serves as a reminder of the fragility of empires and the ever-present forces of change, but also of the remarkable achievements that arise from human endeavor, especially in the realms of art, law, and religion. While the empire may have fallen, its contributions continue to shape the world. Its cultural echoes still felt in modern Eastern orthodoxy, architecture, and intellectual thought. The Byzantine Empire may have passed into history, but its legacy remains a profound testament to the lasting power of civilization's ideals.